Hi, and welcome to another AOGP Scientology Outside of the Church podcast. It is now January 11th, 2025. What we've got here for you is a four-part series from 2017. Me with Andy Nolch, and this has been one of the most popular podcast series, especially this first one, really. We've gotten a lot of positive feedback on these, so I decided to go ahead and pop these onto YouTube and our Buzzsprout account, which will put it on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and everything like that. And we hope you enjoy these. We'll be coming back with some more new podcasts after this. This will give you something to chew on till we get those up later next week, the second week of January. And we hope you enjoy these.
All right, today's guest interview is with Jonathan Burke, an OT VIII auditor. He runs the Advanced Organisation of the Great Plains. It is like a travelling mission and delivers tech up to OT V. John's based in Kansas City, has been a CIO for many years, and he also hosts a podcast called Scientology Outside the Church, which has some interesting interviews. Are you there, John?
Hello, I am. How are you?
Great, I'm good. How you doing?
Awesome.
Yeah? Yeah, you're. What'd you do today? You doing some auditing?
A little bit of auditing, a little bit of solo auditing.
All right, sweet.
Sundays are a little slow.
Yep. So you've got this traveling mission, right? Mm-hmm. So how does that work? Like you visit someone who you want to audit.
Well, somebody contacts me and says, I want X services, whether it's training or processing. And then we work out the details as far as what they want to do. If the timing's right, we go to their area, whether it's 4 states away or 1 state away, and we set up shop with the coach and then deliver the services either in our RV/coach or go over to their house and audit and or train. Simple as that.
Cool. So, because it's sort of interesting. Like, do you go? Is there a team of you, or is it just you and your husband and wife?
It's just me and my wife.
Yeah, but you've got a CS and everything.
Yeah, we have a CS. Much like many of us in the field do, it's all via the internet. So I scan whatever sessions I have. I send them to her as a PDF file, and then get the session reply gets sent back as an email or a PDF, and gets put in the folder and wash, rinse, repeat.
All right, cool. And what about, besides the CS, do you have anyone else that's part of your team?
We have a couple other case supervisors, 2 other auditors that work part-time, depending on where people are needed, mostly in Kansas City. They're based. I do most of the traveling because, well, I have the vehicle to travel in. So other than that, it's just a matter of time, place, form, and event when somebody needs me. A lot of people can't travel because of their jobs, and they want to have somebody come to them and deliver to them. I tend to audit more of the upper bridge with people than I do the lower bridge, just for the fact that that's what people ask for.
Yeah, I think it's a really good idea what you've got going, because it's in places like Europe and America, you can just travel from like state or country to country or whatever, and it can keep you really busy. It's almost similar to like what some stand-up comedians do. And I mean, you can just live in an RV, or these little tiny home things that they've got, which are pretty cool. Like, you can buy a nice big tiny home. I got a friend who builds them, and they're pretty sweet, these tiny home things.
Yeah, they are. Those are usually smaller than what we have. Ours is a 43-foot triple slide, and then we have a trailer behind it. So, for all intents and purposes, we are longer than a semi when we go down the road. So we basically take our, as you guys say, garage with us behind the trailer.
It's a good idea, because, you know, like, I mean, I like the idea of the traveling mission. It kind of reminds me similar to what the Avatar group do, in that they like do a sort of touring Div 6 thing. I think it's a good idea. And also, I think if someone wants to just be an indie auditor, then I mean that's a good idea for them as well. They could just travel around as an indie auditor.
Yeah. I mean, for all intents and purposes, that's what I do. I do more auditing than I do anything else. The OT levels are considered courses. So in delivering those courses, you teach somebody how to audit the OT level, and then you deliver it to them. So you're doing both. I'd say that's probably 75-80% is the auditing part.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good. I mean, I'm like, unless you're in maybe Clearwater or LA or something where, you know, you can make a living off just being in that area. Imagine you have to travel.
We were there this last winter.
Yeah, imagine you have to travel around, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, there aren't a ton of people that want services in the field, but those that do really want it. It's a difficult thing for people. There's a lot of handlings that need to be done, and you have to wear a lot of hats in order to survive in the field.
Yeah, and Scientology, I mean, hopefully in the future it gets bigger, but at the moment it's more like, yeah, you know, you're going to have a handful of people here and there, but it's not like, you know, this booming thing at the moment where you can just stay in one location. Yeah,
we're trying to stitch things together and create a community over time. We've been doing this, it'll be 4 years this coming October that we've been delivering. Slowly but surely, I see an improvement as far as the number of people that are reaching and everything like that. Maybe that has to do more with the outflow that I've done. I don't know, but the podcasts have helped a lot, not just mine, but yours, David's on Scientolopedia. You know, it's just there are a lot more people kind of stitching things together to create a world community vis-a-vis the internet that I think is helping a lot pull some of the people out of their shells and out of the restimulation that they find themselves sitting and getting out of the church.
Yeah, I think the internet's really helped the indie movement because it brings up the comm level and people can find out what's going on. I mean, with my day job, it's pretty damn simple in that I can just do letterbox drops basically, or send out text messages to customers, and that keeps me busy. So my create on it is just, you know, a bit of text messages or flyers. And as long as I just do a good job, then people are always calling me. So with your job, because it's different, is the create hard? Like, is it a grind being an indie auditor?
It is extremely tough.
Wow.
There are a lot of issues that you have to deal with in the field. One would think, well, you know, you find a CS and you go out and you get to know them, they get to know you, that sort of thing. I wish that were the case. There are varying degrees of people that are case supervisors or auditors. To be honest with you, all case supervisors are auditors, but actually meeting somebody like me, like if I was a zebra, I've yet to meet another zebra. I'm the only zebra I've run into, other than if I went to go get audited myself, say like with Trey Lotz, for example, or something like that. We never cross paths. The only people that I do run into are CSs, and they're all different. They all do different things differently because of when they got out, which is a crucial subject that people need to understand. Because all CSs do things differently based off of the technology and the degree of where it was changed at the time, which is crucial for somebody who's a field auditor. Because if you don't mesh up, or let's say they're used to behaving like they were in the Sea Org and it was really crappy for them, they're going to treat you crappy. That's been one of my experiences.
So is it basically the challenge of it? Is it to keep the tech good? Is that the challenge of it?
Well, yeah, that's the challenge, because let's say I did my Scientology training in '88. I I got some more training after the Golden Age of Tech came out, which I thought was a bit poisoned, if you will. And then I got my internship for knots and everything in the field just a couple of years ago. And that went very well. And with the same CS, that same CS later that year ended up sleeping with my PC, who was a foreign language PC and spoke Spanish, and I didn't speak English. And the whole thing just blew up in a big fireball.
Oh, so you have dramas. You can have dramas come into it.
Yeah. It's ridiculous. And this was a person that was in the Sea Org for years at Flag, so these sorts of things happen, and you don't see them coming, and it's like a bus blindsiding you in the middle of the road on a Tuesday afternoon.
Yeah. Well, what about finding PCs? Is that annoying? Having to create on that, is that hard or?
Well, there are a lot of people that start from the bottom and audit people, handle their drug issues and things like that in the field, and then bring them up through the grades and everything like that. I don't have a lot of interest in that. I haven't had a lot of pleasant experiences with drug cases. I can handle drug cases, but when they haven't had any auditing, I mean, you're really dealing with a raw PC, and you need the infrastructure of an organization, not just 2 or 3 people, but you need 7, 8 to 10 people to be able to handle that. You've got to have a chaplain. You need, and whether anybody likes this or not, you need an ethics officer to deal with drug cases. Alcohol cases as well. Sometimes they're rougher than drug cases more often than not. So, it just varies from person to person. But being trained in knots and in the upper levels, I tend to attract those people, but I also tend to attract people who have clear issues, who were either clear in the church or their past life clears. I've had close to a dozen people like that in the last 4 years.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up the alcohol thing, because I noticed that when I was in the Melbourne church, that alcoholics can be quite problematic, and I'm just interested in what your opinion of this is. I noticed with this alcoholic was it like, so they'll be clean for a bit, and then they'll go and drink alcohol again, and then they'll go to ethics, and then they'll do a program ethics, and then they'll go along all right, and then suddenly they'll drink again, and then they'll go to ethics again, and it was I thought it was really silly, because I just saw the person just do the same thing again and again and tell ethics, yes, I'm not going to drink or whatever, and I'll just be thinking they're going to drink again, like, and so I kind of thought, I just thought, what the hell is the handling on that? I mean, my opinion was, just chuck them in session, keep them going up the bridge, and just stop the stupid ethics thing, because it's not working continually sending them to ethics, because they just don't obey it.
Well, Pierre Ethier, who is a class 12 in Toronto, I went to visit him to do some auditing with him on the L's. And we were having a conversation over dinner, and I was really surprised what he said on this. And at the time, I didn't really have a whole lot of experience with alcohol cases versus drug cases. Most of mine were just drug cases that I had audited. And his opinion was that the alcohol cases were much more difficult to deal with than the drug cases. And honestly, I found that to be true, and I don't disagree with you. I've seen that delirium tremens of, it's easy to say you're sorry after you do it sort of a thing with an alcoholic, and then they fall off of the wagon. But it's a bit of a cat chasing its tail, because you have this issue of ethics needs to be in for the tech to go in. And so the ethics goes in, and then the tech goes in a little bit, and then their ethics go out. And basically what it is they're PTS to alcohol. And that is something that's been overlooked. And alcohol, like LRH says, is a forgetter. They're trying to forget something. So there needs to be an undercut for whatever it is that they're trying to forget. And one for one, they're always trying to forget something. So there's either an engram, a secondary, a lock, or all of the above that's beneath that. And you really need to, forgive the term, take baby steps and just do it gradiently to get them off of it. And get them a purif as quick as possible. Auditing isn't a first solution for an alcoholic. getting them a purif and getting them objectives primarily. Those are the two things that'll work. But a lot of people don't have time for a purif, so shortcuts are made, especially in the church. I would be, if I had an alcoholic that was like that, I would make sure they did a purif first and then did their objectives, straight wire, and so on, just like the standard bridges.
Yeah, so you would, after you see that ethics hasn't worked a few times, you would obviously think that the bridge will handle this person's case? Or a special program will handle the case, or?
A special program would handle the case. I mean, dependent on what you found out in the DFP interview and things like that. And every case is different, yet every case is the same. So I think the first thing would be get them a little life repair if you can, and keep them on the wagon, and then get them into the box, get them a purif, and get them a really good bank of objectives, and keep the ARC high. Because the problem with alcoholics is there's usually an issue with some sort of ARC, and they tend to ARC break really easy. So you got to keep that ARC high and keep your TRs in and be patient, because that's really the only way to handle them. In my experience, drug cases are easier.
Well, it's interesting because this alcohol example is similar to other things. Like there are some people, like for example, someone who go to a prostitute too often, and it's just their version of alcohol, and so they'll go in ethics and they'll get it handled again and again and again, and it'll just end up being a waste of time. So I just want to get like a sort of clear answer on this. Like, so you think that yeah, it's stupid just continually sending someone to ethics to do the same program.
Yeah, well, the one of the definitions, not LRH's definitions, but one of the definitions is doing the same thing and expecting different results. Like you use the example of somebody visiting a prostitute or somebody that masturbates all the time. In those situations, when you're dealing with the body and you're dealing with sex, I don't know if you know this or not, but what you're dealing with is you're dealing with a drug addict. Did you know that?
Like as in the body's like a drug or something?
Well, when a person has an orgasm, and this might be dicey for some of our listeners, but you just need to raise their confront and take a look at this. Dopamine is what is created and exuded from the glands when a person has an orgasm. And what happens is the being in the body, and this is where the differentiation needs to be made, the body gets used to this, and the body runs the thetan around. So when somebody gets used to a lot of dopamine being put into the body to smooth them out, if they're having a problem in their life or something like that, and then they have to handle it that way with going to see a prostitute or with sex and one of its forms, they are a dopamine addict. So you have to treat it the same way. And this is something that was overlooked in the church that can be handled just as if it was any other eating drug on a drug list.
Wow. That's an interesting way of looking at it from an auditing and CS point of view. I mean, I definitely noticed in life, I'd seen drug addicts, and then I'd look at someone who was like a food addict or someone who was a sex addict, and I was like, yeah, they're just different degrees of badness. And it's like, yeah, the drugs can really get in there and mess your mind up. And someone who's addicted to masturbation or whatever, it doesn't mess their mind up as much. But it's the same thing in that you've got this thetan that's hooked on sensations from the body. And to me, that's just a pathetic condition to be in. And that's what's, I guess, the problem with all of us in our bodies, in that we're stuck in these things and we're hooked on these sensations from the body. And it kind of reminds me of that line that the Christians say in the Lord's Prayer or whatever, that it says, lead me away from temptation or whatever, because there's something evil about temptation, because it's true. Yeah, really, that rings true.
Yeah, it's an old tale, and the thing is, and you can come full circle on this, just if you were to look at it from the viewpoint of the OT levels and the entire bridge, that eventually you get to a point on the OT levels, and it's different for everybody. There isn't a line of demarcation where it does or it doesn't happen, but you start to differentiate the fact that you're the driver of the VW that you're driving. You're not the VW. And when you really, really get that and you differentiate the difference between the drives of the thetan and the drives of the body, and you kind of talk to the body and you say, hey, look, I'm not going to have you take me into Perth today. I need to go to Sydney instead. That's where the differentiation comes in, is you have to realize that there is a source on this, and on the upper levels, you're able to differentiate. Now, I'm not saying that it happens early on, because you can get pushed around by the Nolch case and never really realize it for ages. But being able to differentiate what the body's desires are, what your desires are, is in fact part of the OT levels. And
wow,
being able to make a differentiation, even in session, you can sit there and you can see a on the meter, and you go, well, I didn't think anything. Well, that's the body. The body's going, I want to do this, or I'm thinking about this. And when you can start to differentiate, because you've got yourself and you've got the body, and then you have the Nolch case. And like LRH talks about in the HCOB about the composite being, that's what you're dealing with. And you have to differentiate these different sources out, because you've got the Nolch case, you've got the body, and you've got yourself. And when you can differentiate that, then you can start getting a handle on, well, I want to have sex today, or I want to eat today, or I want to do this. And you can just kind of treat it like you would a 5-year-old kid. Okay, listen, Johnny, here's the deal. We've got these products we have to get out right now, and then we'll have a nice big lunch around about 3 o'clock. Can you deal with that? Yeah, I can deal with that. And then you just move on. But it literally works that way, especially when you get on the upper end of the bridge.
Yeah, it's really interesting, because I remember one time I was a bit sleepy, and I was like sleeping in, and although I think it's kind of good to sleep in, because if your body needs rest, it needs rest. But I thought, in my head, I was like, well, hold on, if my thoughts create reality, can't I just think that I'm not tired and just get up? And so I sort of did it, and I kind of thought, wow, like when you go OT like properly, is that kind of what it's like, in that you can literally just sit there in bed in the morning and be like, well, I'm going to change that reality that I'm tired, and then just suddenly you can get up? Or like, oh, I'm going to change that reality that like I desire alcohol or whatever, and just change it by thinking, and then you don't want to drink?
Well, there's, depending on where you're at as to where you can actually, because see, the thing is if you looked at the grade chart and you'll see on the side, I forget if it's the right or the left side. I think it's the left side. It may even be in the middle, depending on the grade chart. When you start, it actually says source on there. Well, a lot of people think, well, source. Oh, well, that's LRH. No, it's not. It's source. It's what's source. What's the source? What's the source of the problem? Where is this thought coming from? What's the source of
Sorry,
that?
where on
What's
the bridge? Where on the bridge is that? What level?
I don't remember specifically, but it's quite a ways up there, because you're looking at the top, because you're looking at a recognition of source, because that's what awareness is, oh, well, that's coming from this, or this is the problem here that other people aren't seeing. We need to pull the string and find out what this issue is. So the further up the bridge you go, and beyond even what LRH mapped out, that's where you start to really get the idea of source, not only with yourself as a composite being, but as to what's going on in the universe and other universes around you. Those are the sources. So you're able to spot these things, not from it's just, there it is. It's really cool.
Yeah, so okay, but also, as you get rid of your OT case, or you could call it pre-OT case, like before OT VIII,
right?
You strip that away, and then is it then you're able to just override the problem, or basically you don't have the problem? You don't have to override the problem with tiredness in the morning or something.
I can only speak for myself and the people that I've dealt with in delivering services, and I think that it varies widely, because one person can have abilities and they could be on OT2 or OT3, and they may surpass some people that are on OT7, because they're just naturally in better shape. They're more uptoned, and maybe they haven't. I'm trying to think of a good way to describe it, and I don't want to go beyond the scope of the question, but some people are just in better shape than others. So it'll vary where they'll run into this sort of thing. But you will find that you can be a lot more caught over things. To the degree that you go in session, and to the degree that you audit, is to the degree that your awareness level is going to increase. and you'll start to see things that you wouldn't normally see. You'll start to be aware of things. Some of them will be frightening because you didn't want to see them, and all you did is just get rid of the things that caused you to not want to see them. Whether it's with the body or whether with other people, every OT has different abilities. But across the boards, your awareness level is going to rise tremendously around about mid-OT 5 as you clear away the debris that is blocking your perception.
I just thought of something, it's a little bit off topic, but it's kind of like,
Sure.
It's something that I've noticed in me, in that you evolve and you find out things, and I imagine that you and other OTs have this problem, and then suddenly when you're around like a WOG, I mean, the difference between you and the WOG is so great. Like, it's like almost like your comm level just drops down, because it's like you almost can't communicate them because you're aware of all this other stuff, and then it kind of almost becomes a new problem that you've got in your life, because it's like, what, like, it's just kind of weird, because it's just like, wow, like this is what, like for example, I've looked into the whole alien issue a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And what's his face? What's that former astronaut, Edgar Mitchell or whatever? I mean, he says he says in interviews, and I mean, I've collected heaps of other information to back this up, but he says that the US are in communication with an alien race, right? And he says, no, I know for sure, right?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And I'm also at that point where I almost know for sure, because I've seen so much evidence for it. And so then it's like you're sitting next to someone at a bus stop or something, and it's like, who has no idea about this, and it's like, how can you communicate to this person when, like, it's just you're in a whole new realm of existence, and it's kind of like, I don't know, it kind of becomes a new problem in life, in that there's definitely something that sort of cuts your comm, like, as in, like, mm-hmm. you like, I can talk to someone like you, but when it comes to the average person, it's like, whoa, you know what I mean? They're still in the matrix. It's kind of weird.
Yeah. Well, admittedly, it is something that as you go up the OT levels, you tend to pull in people that want to talk to you because you're a cleaner's terminal. And it's sort of like having a fishing line, and you put a little drop of oil on it, and the oil wants to go downhill and ride down that fishing line, and you're at the bottom as an OT. And, I mean, you know, as an auditor, it's just something you're used to. It can get tiring to be in session 8-10 hours a day and have the inflow constantly. But I would think that most auditors, including myself, are flat on it. I didn't really like myself, and I didn't really like people until I finished OT VII. That was one of the end phenomena that I had, and I have a lot more compassion for people, and I'd always wanted to be an auditor, so it was there. But it is difficult to talk to people that have different realities. But the fact of the matter is that if you don't, you're going to be one big lonely Thetan.
Yeah, and I think it's the thing that you know, waking up to the truth. I think it is a bit of a rough journey. I think it's confronting. I think it's like, whoa, you know.
Sure.
I think it's much better than being, you know, under condition of being mind controlled and having no idea what's going on around you and not being at cause. But there is some bliss in that ignorance. There is some. But personally, the only reason I ever went on this journey was because I was unhappy with living basically a sheeple existence. You know what I mean? And I don't mean to put down anyone who doesn't know about what's going on in the world, but I didn't like it, right? So that's why I left that and moved on towards truth. And it has been a bit of a tough journey and stuff, and like, it's confronting, and it's like, what the hell is going on and stuff. But I do think it's better, but it's not like, you know, it's not like it's just a smooth path. You know?
Yeah. Well, don't make the mistake either that all Scientologists are created equal and they have the same reality that you do, because you will be sadly mistaken, and it will really AFC break you. There are lots of Scientologists that are OTs, that are OT VII, OT VIII, and you could talk to them about the alien issue or the hollow earth theories. I mean, I could go on and on and on, and they just, you know, talk to the hand. Talk to the hand. I mean, even out in the field, they just don't want to have any confront with it. They don't want to talk about it. I've talked to Scientology celebrities. I've had friends that have talked to Scientology celebrities who were fairly high on the bridge, and they don't want to talk to you at all about any of that type of thing. So, and it blows my mind. I mean, how can somebody be in Scientology and not have an interest in this sort of a thing? You know, LRH was a sci-fi writer, but the fact of the matter is that LRH said that science fiction doesn't even scratch the surface of the way the universe actually works and the way things are.
It's interesting because there's that thing that LRH says where you get more charge off a case and then they can confront the truth more. And I definitely experienced that in me, but it's almost like with some other people, that rule almost doesn't apply. Or that's what actually makes me start to think maybe there is no objective truth. Maybe, you know what I mean? It's like, what the hell? Maybe what they're saying is what they're saying and they're creating in their universe, and what I'm seeing is what I'm seeing. And and they're different. You know what I mean? There is no common ground.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you know, that's the funny thing about ARC is that like electrons, as an analog, like electrons tend to attract like electrons. And when you have somebody that is a similar tone level to you, you're going to find that you could say, "Hey, I just saw an android walk down the sidewalk," and they would go, "Really?" But if you talk to somebody who was maybe 3 or 4 points down the tone scale, they would ridicule you for it. And if you talk to somebody who was higher than you in tone level, they might just kind of go, "Yeah," and not think anything of it. So that's what the tone scale has to do with a lot of that stuff. And I was thinking about this today. Probably the biggest problem that we have as Scientologists out in the field and in the church is that people don't grasp the tone scale well enough, and they don't know how to choose their people. They don't know how to spot tone levels, and that's a big part of the problem why we're in the situation we're in out in the field, and the church is the way that it is. And I'm not faulting LRH on this. I understand that there were circumstances that caused the things that happened, that caused the things that happened the way they did, but even he had a hard time spotting the people that he should have around him. I mean, that is just completely obvious to me, and I wish it were different. But if the old man can have a problem with it, we can have a problem with it.
I mean, are you talking about like in the late 70s and early 80s?
Yeah. I mean, the people that he surrounded himself with, the people that he trusted and things like that. I mean, you know, I wasn't there. I was a kid at the time, but I see the fact that if you looked at science of survival and you applied that to some of the people around him, like Miscavige and his communicators and things like that tried to cut him off from the outside world, if he'd been able to actually spot them on the tone scale, these things wouldn't have happened. That's my opinion. Now, other people might go, "Well, you're full of shit, John," but that's my opinion.
Maybe he was, I don't know, because in a desperate sort of situation, maybe he was like, you know, he had to put up with the stuff that he had. You know what I mean? Like, as in, it was a crazy, wild situation. It was just like, yeah, this guy's an anger tone and this guy's an alcoholic, but we need to have him around.
Well, like he says, 1 out of 18 people is truly an executive. That's a policy of his own. And, you know, maybe that was the best that he could get, and that's all he had to work with, which is basically what you're saying. But the point being, you know, what you have to work with, and if you want things to improve, you need to improve them through getting people up the bridge and auditing them. And that was probably one of the biggest faults that we could be faulted on. I never was in the Sea Org. I was on staff. I did a radio interview with Ray Robles out in Nevada back in 2009, 2010, and he told me a story about a Sea Org member came up to him, and I can't remember if he was at a mission or an org, and he said, "Well, what's with this auditing the staff thing?" The Sea Org member said to Ray, and he says, "Yeah, you know, people are winning, we're doing well," and the Sea Org member says, "Stop it, because if you audit them too much, they're going to leave, they're going to go do something else." This was 1973, Andy.
Wow.
This stuff was going on. Yeah. So staff enhancement was always something that needed to be put there, because you're not going to have the things go on that went on when people are being handled in session, getting up the bridge, and they're winning. And no, they're not going to go and take off somewhere else. That was the Sea Org members' weird think on the whole thing, because OTs work better in numbers. They don't work solitarily. Look at what happened to LRH. He didn't have enough OTs around him. He had a bunch of high school rejects.
So hold on. Did the Sea Org member say that to Ray Robles?
Yeah, he said that to Ray Robles.
Yeah.
He said, you got to knock this off, because they're not going to stick around if you keep auditing them. They're going to go off and start their own businesses and everything, and you won't have them anymore. I was stupefied by that.
I can see that idea, though. I can understand how someone would say that, though. Like, as in, well, for example, with me, I felt like, and especially now that the church isn't really standard, that the more your awareness comes up, the more you can look around the church and be like, what the hell, this is not right, and then you leave, you know?
Yeah, well, like in my situation in a class 5 org, nobody ever got any auditing. I was one of only 2 auditors that could audit, because they were too busy putting out fires and running around like chickens with their heads cut off, get the mag out or get this stat up, or and it didn't happen. And the fact of the matter is that place is just as much. I mean, it hasn't got any better in the time that I left it in 1990. That's a long time ago.
So when was it? So in the 90s you were...
Yeah, 88, 89, and 90.
Yeah. It seems. I mean, the big thing that they seem to be leaving out is the whole Div 6 thing, and that's where I think that the whole infiltration of the upper management thing, because it seems like it's a direct thing coming from upper management, in that it's just milk the current members for what they're worth and don't promote Div 6 besides doing some fancy Super Bowl commercial that won't really get much result anyway.
Yeah, well, it's an obvious dwindling spiral, and they don't want new people, because what's happened over the last 20 years is they keep dropping off these things that they can no longer deliver properly because they didn't deliver them properly in the first place. So they don't want the extra particles of new people unless they're a whale who has a lot of money, and then they'll stick their noses up their ass as far as they can, get as much money from them as possible.
Yeah, well,
otherwise
I think that's the ideal. I think the whole Ideal program is a classic example of that, in that it's a nice sort of elite sort of church to go into and stuff, and then you just get whales. It's just for servicing whales. Don't you sort of think the Ideal seems to be tailored for that?
Yeah, because I mean, if you just look at the places, that's all it could be, because what you're dealing with is something that's way above the normal havingness of somebody that would come in off the street and want to do a Div 6 course. They're going to feel out of place, and they're going to feel rejected, and they're going to know this place is too fancy for me. It's like handling a guy that lives on the street and saying, here's a tux.
Yeah, exactly.
You're not really going to know what to do with it.
Yeah, so do you think it sort of puts off people who aren't, big shots?
I think it does, and I think that people get involved with it, and they think, yeah, I can move up to this, and they can't afford it, because these places are costing ridiculous amounts of money. And the scary part of it is that they recruit people to make these donations for the buildings, the whales that were already there before they had the Ideal org, and then they actually charge the org rent to be there. So these people donate hundreds of thousands of dollars, and then the org has to pay rent, which they have to get from their parishioners, and then they rent out 3/4 of the building to Red Lobster and private companies. So they become a real estate acquisition firm, and that's it. That's what Scientology is now.
What do you mean they rent out the building to private companies and Red Lobster? What do you mean by that?
Well, like in Tampa, for example, they have a big building, and they rent the building out to other lessees. Lessees or leaseors, I always forget which it is, but they lease out other parts of their Ideal org building to other companies to move into and do business in. So what they're doing is they're getting people to pay for these buildings, putting a floor in for the Ideal org, or 2 maybe, or 3, but maybe it's 6, 7, 8, 9. Like in Kansas City's case, they bought a 10-story building. So one floor is Scientology, and the rest of it is leased out to other companies that do business in that building by Scientology CST.
Hold on. So you telling me, are you serious? They bought a 10-story building, right? The first story was just the ideal org, and the rest they were leasing out.
Yeah, they do that in many of the orgs. They rent the building out.
How can they fit the whole org in one level, though? It's a pretty big level.
Isn't that, I don't mean to be coy, but isn't that obvious?
No, because a lot of when you look at all the ideal org, the videos of them promoting all the ideal orgs, like in Taiwan and Sydney, and the ones that are in those buildings that are height-wise, because Melbourne's a little bit different, but they're all 4 stories, 4 levels high, and
yeah. Well, that's how it's presented, but a lot of the orgs, they rent out space in the building to other companies. Originally, in Tampa's case, they had purchased an old cigar factory, and they had renovated it with church, parishioners' money. And then when it came time to make them St. Hill size, they brought everybody over from Flag and put them in the course room. And the course room was insufferably small, and they couldn't fit anybody in the org worth a squat, because St. Hill had over 250 students. And I was told by the then HES, Trevor Troyer, what's the deal here? Why aren't there 250 people in the course room in this place at St. Hill? He says, Miscavige didn't invest himself and found out that those logs were incorrect, and there was never that many people on course, blah, blah, blah.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, and I was at St. Hill last lifetime, and there are people that are still alive that were there, and that was the fact, and there were that many people there. But the thing is Miscavige is, back in the day when he was making St. Hill size orgs, what he was doing is he was shipping people in from other places to get Tampa org to be St. Hill size, because Tampa org had a handful of people. They were nowhere close to it. So basically he falsified the stats, made it a St. Hill size org, which he did with several other places. And when he found that he couldn't do that anymore and he couldn't maintain the facade or the lie, then he had to switch over to something else that was easier to do, which was acquire real estate with other people's money and then rent it out to people who would lease it while they had a quote-unquote ideal org in the same building. That's what they're doing.
Oh, man. This is a big bombshell that you're dropping. So you're saying that nowadays that the ideal orgs have been around for a while, and they've sort of failed. Now they're renting out certain, they're renting out rooms to other organisations, and making money off it. And that, because I remember hearing when I was involved with the church, the LA org, Miscavige had sent all the Sea Org people to work there to make it St. Hill size. So
yeah, that's true.
And they advertised it, and I spoke to a Melbourne staff member who actually did go to LA, and he was there when all the Sea Org staff were working there, and he said, yeah, they were making big GIs of 400,000 and stuff, and it was sort of booming. But what you're suggesting that when the Sea Org then left and handed it over to normal Class 5 staff,
it crashed.
It just crashed.
Yeah, it crashed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it did. It did. And that's unfortunate, but that's what happens when you falsify stats. It becomes a house of cards, and the lie can only be kept up so long before the wife finds out.
Well, I mean, it's so interesting, because I remember, because when you think of an average church member, they'll just see the event from 2015 or whatever, where they showed all the stats from the LA org, and they'll go, yeah, LA org is St. Hill size, and then it's just they just don't know the truth. It's just fake. It's just yeah, it was for a certain amount of time.
Yeah, Scientology is the fastest shrinking church organization on the planet due to the out-tech and off-policy, which LRH predicted back in the early 50s would happen, because the guy isn't honest, and the people that he pushes around are PTS to him, and he just keeps proffering more and more altruismus in order to get it to persist. Because the only reason that something persists per the Scientology axioms is because there's a lie behind it. And that's the only reason the church is persisting now, is because he keeps stuccoing the walls with more lies in order to keep it there. He's basically using inverted Scientology, or what others would call black Dianetics, in order to keep it there. And you know, when you get other people, I mean, it's just crazy to tell somebody, yeah, they get people to pay for their buildings who are in the church, and then they rent the building out to the organization that these people are a part of, and then they rent the rest of the building out to other companies to then make money on top of it. I mean, it's fraud. It's fraud to the parishioners that paid for the building.
I know. I mean, it's really funny when you think about the Scientology history and stuff, and prior to like 2005, before this whole ideologue thing really happened. I mean, enough had happened in Scientology history. Like, it was interesting enough. Like, it was epic enough, and Miscavige had done enough, and then he had to top it off with the ideologue thing, and it's just like, it's just epic.
Yeah, you know? Yeah, it's sort of a, could I fuck this up anymore?
I know. It is. It's just amazing. And, you know, I mean, because I remember, I think I heard probably some Scientology haters talking about the LA org and saying something like, oh, it's empty. And then I would think in my head, but hold on, you know, what about, you know, this apparent thing of LA org, you know, being St. Hill size and having all these people going in there and all this sort of stuff. And it's just so confusing. And you're just like, who am I going to try? Like, have you do you know what, recently, do you know for sure if the place is a ghost town or not, or what? It can't be a ghost town.
Yeah, it's a ghost town.
No,
I've been out there.
Are you serious?
Oh yeah.
Even I find that hard to believe.
Yeah, Asho, AO. I mean, it's all a ghost town. I mean, it literally, they've chased away probably 80% of the people and alienated them beyond ever wanting to come back in with the books and the reg. I mean, you know, it's gone so far that two wheels of the wagon are over the cliff and the last two are on the backside and the wagon's pointing down the side of the cliff. And there's nothing he can do about it. There's nothing that any of the people can do about it other than keep coming after the whales.
So
that's all they can do is wash, rinse, repeat.
So for I don't know how long Miscavige sent all this Sea Org to work at LA Org, but I would imagine it was at least 6 months or a year or something. And that I know because so I know, but they were pulling big GIs for a while, and there was activity going on there, and maybe they did almost get to St. Hill size or something. But you're telling me that just as soon as the staff left, it just dropped off, and that was it. As soon as the Sea Org left, it just dropped off.
Right, that's always what happened with any of the Class 5 orgs that they did that. Stevens Creek, Orange County, all of the orgs, they would peak out. Some of them did hit St. Hill size like Orange County, and I think Stevens Creek, and maybe a handful of others. But you'd have this big, huge push, and then once that huge push was there, the individuals in the org, the people that were just non-Sea Org members who were org members, they couldn't keep it up, and they always fell back down below St. Hill size within a few months. Here's a prime example. Wichita Mission, back in the mid to late 90s. The PES at Wichita Mission, Wichita was Mission of the Year, I believe 2 years in a row, if I remember correctly, because they had these high stats. And I thought, how in the world can this place be Mission of the Year 2 years in a row? There's nobody here. And I was there every day.
How long after they got the award or whatever were you there?
I was there in that 2 year period, both years.
So when they got Mission of the Year, you were actually attending it?
Yeah, I was there. I lived in Wichita at the time.
How the hell did they get Mission of the Year?
Well, that's the story I'm telling you. What happened is that the PES, it was found out later, what she had been doing was she was taking names and numbers out of the phone book and putting them into central files, and then she was buying the books herself. And how we found out about this is that my girlfriend at the time she was cleaning houses for a living, and she went over to the PES's house, and she went into this spare bedroom, and from ceiling to the floor, wall to wall, front to back, was a stack after stack after stack of new Div 6 books. And she was buying the books herself and putting these made up names in central files. So they got Mission of the Year 2 years in a row because she was falsifying stats and fraudulently adding people's names to the CF and selling books and services to people who weren't on lines at all.
Yeah, well, and even in that situation, I still don't think that person should get that mission should get Mission of the Year, because there should be these other stats that actually recording people that are in the auditing chair and all these other sorts of things collecting. But obviously, because the missions are doing so shit in general, that if you just sell that many books, that qualifies you to win Mission of the Year.
Right, but the frightening thing is that I'm not quite sure in retrospect which it was, but the thing is that nobody asked any questions and went along with it. And this was one of the mission holders from Stevens Creek. That's how stunning it was, is that nobody asked any questions, which is the same thing we see now is, why wasn't anybody asking any questions and doing something about what was going on with the church at large when these sorts of things were going on in the mid-90s and all the way back even into the 60s with these falsifications of things. But see, the thing is when the cat's away, the mice will play.
It's pretty ridiculous. Like when I was involved with the Melbourne Org, I noticed that there was 2 times, I think, where they got like Org of the Year award for the birthday game. And this is why I think the birthday game's no good at all, because it's not based, instead of being based over 1 year, it really should be based over 5 years or something. Like it just anyway. Yeah. So because what Melbourne Org would do is that I think they won it the Org of the Year when I think maybe GAT2 was released or something. So so what they did is they just have this up and down pattern, and so they and Melbourne Org would manage to have this really, everyone would push and they would push for it, and they'd have this good period of affluent statistics, but then of course they would just crash, and then a few years later they would have another period where they would suddenly really push and they'd have a period of affluent statistics, and then it would crash. But here's the thing, even when the stats were kind of high and there was the affluence period going on, it's not like the org was even close to being St. Hill's size. It was just the fact that it was coming from such a low level and it was shooting up.
Right. It's all relative.
Yeah. So you could even be around while they were, and they weren't falsifying. They weren't doing dodgies with the selling of the books or anything, but even you can be there when they get Org of the Year award, birthday game award or whatever, and. The org is small, and that's where I'll be sitting there looking around going, how the hell did we win that award? Like, this, obviously the way they collect the statistics for this birthday game is just crap, because this org isn't busy and it's winning Org of the Year award, and people are like, yeah, we got Org of the Year, and I'm just like, this whole birthday game is horrible because it promotes stat pushing, which is just no good, because it's just this stupid way of, I don't know, like LRH's admin tech works and stats I think are good, but whatever the church is doing with stats is they're doing it in a bad way.
Yeah, well, I did an interesting interview with a fellow by the name of Boyd Hutchins back in 2009 when I was doing podcasts. Back then, we didn't call them podcasts, we called it the KSW radio show. And
by the way, where could we find these interviews, by the way?
You can't. The only copies exist with Scientolopedia. I turned them over to David LaCroix. They haven't been published on the website, so you might ask him to put those up. There's about 22 or 23 of them. Some really good ones in there. 5 or 6 of them are on our podcast website over on Blog Talk Radio, but the balance of them, a majority of them, David has, and they just haven't been put on the website yet, to my knowledge.
Yeah, because you could put them
but anyway,
you could put them up in the Scientology Outside the Church podcast thing, because I know on that, I think there's only 2 interviews on that, on when I look at it.
Yeah, I need to get them back from David, and I just haven't had a chance to get them back on there. But there's some really good technical panels, and the Boyd Hutchins interview was an interesting one because he worked at one of the CLOs, which is a Continental Liaison Office on the East Coast in New York City in Hell's Kitchen, and he was telling me, and he has vanished. I haven't seen him anywhere in years, but he was telling me that when he was there at the CLO and working, they were telling him to do these off-policy things. And he refused to do the off-policy thing, so he was literally doing the opposite, which was LRH policy. And when he was doing the opposite, the stats would take off like crazy, and then they would get pissed off at him because he wasn't doing what they told him to do. I can't make this shit up.
Yeah.
This literally was happening.
I know, yeah. Yeah, it's what would be an example of what were the off-policy things that they would want him to do?
Well, I can't recall any of the specifics on it, but it was, I mean, with him working at the CLO, he was having to push down lines to the Class 5 orgs that were part of the Continental Liaison Office and tell them to do specific actions. I don't remember what his post was, but he was telling them to do the LRH actions despite the upper management telling him to do off-policy things. And that's the particular thing that I remember about it is, and this was probably, being 2009, I think this might have been in the early 2000s that this was going on. But he saw that it was off policy, and he went ahead and just disobeyed orders and told them to do the right thing. And the class 5 org started going up, and they're like, what are you doing? I mean, it's insane. But this is actually happening. This isn't some other paradigm. This was in the last 15 years. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I remember when I was on staff and you want to just be a bookstore officer, and then you get these comms that are from up lines or whatever, and you get all these cross-orderings going on. So, like, instead of just being on post or being left to produce, you have to watch this thingo, and then go do this, and do this special selling program. And then there's, like, the whole GAT2 thing's coming out, and you just get, like, you're like a pinball that just gets knocked around, and...
Yeah.
It's like, it just, all these things, it's always, it just takes you off post. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Well, like LRH, it falls under the HCOPL ripoffs. It falls under the HCOPL moonlighting. It falls under DevT. It falls off onto cross-hatting. I mean, you know, just goes on and on and on and on and on. But, you know, then it all comes down to anatomy of an overt, HCOB. That's what it all comes down to. Ultimately, that's where it's at. And this whole thing loops back for me. From my viewpoint as an auditor and a course supervisor and a CS, is if people don't understand concepts, words, and symbols, this is what you get, folk. This is what you get.
It is just quite interesting. The whole thing of the Church of Scientology is just an enigma or something, because it really is interesting, because it's like you got this great tech like word clearing tech, and then you got auditing tech that should be keying people out so they become more rational, yet at the same time things are just nutty. And I think maybe it's a fact that, like, maybe it's the fact that the average human is so messed up that when you actually improve them, they actually go into this condition of being a functioning messed up person. And that's what you're seeing.
Yeah.
That's what you're seeing in the church. Yeah. You're seeing a functioning messed up organization. And then you have to push through that, and then suddenly you actually have a smooth sailing organization. Yeah, I think it's something like that.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that LRH talks about a lot in the briefing course lectures is the phenomena of the now I'm supposed to. And this is something that Miscavige suffers from tremendously, is he's got a series of now I'm supposed to's that he's operating off of, to where he's actually taken Scientology from it being an OT organization and brought it down from one now I'm supposed to the next. Well, now I'm supposed to wear Gucci suits, and I'm supposed to have a $5,000 suit on because I need to look like the CEO of any other company that's out there in the Fortune 500. And now I'm supposed to fly in a jet, and now I'm supposed to be in a bulletproof vehicle like the president. And it just goes on and on and on. That's what you're dealing with this guy, and probably some of his closer cohorts, but a lot of which are gone now. But that's the delirium tremens that the organization is in, and there's not a whole lot we can do about that. Honestly, I don't put a whole lot of attention on it anymore myself. Now, that being said, I don't know if you've heard this or not. So are you sitting down?
Yep. Hold on, mate. I just got to quickly. I had an idea for a question. Hey, can you remember what you're saying? Because I just want a quick answer to this question because I don't want to have to do too many interviews. I only want to do one interview. Okay, so quickly. Okay, how many orgs did the Sea Org go into and try and make St. Hill for a period of time and then leave?
To my knowledge, at least. Well, I mean, I guess you'd have to qualify that with how many Sea Org members. But to my knowledge, at least a dozen.
At least a dozen orgs. They actually had a huge team of Sea Org people go in there and get the stats up.
Yeah, and here's an interesting piece of information. When they did that with Tampa Org, they dangled the carrot in front of them of, well, you'll get the Universe Corps, and the Universe Corps will come in and audit you to OT VIII, which was part of the birthday program that LRH set up in the 339R program. Well, when they had gotten done falsifying all of that St. Hill size, they then told all of the people that were part of Tampa Org staff that they would have to go over to Flag to do all of their services and that there would not be any Universe Corps coming into their org. And to my knowledge, no org had a Universe Corps at any given time.
What? These are bombs. I heard there's New York and there was some Russian orgs or something that were doing it.
Yeah, but they were brought in for very short periods of times, and then they were yanked back to be put on some other program. And nobody ever got to OT VIII or even NOTS, probably not even OT levels at all, from any of those programs. It just didn't happen.
So with the Tampa example, so they got it to St. Hill size. Maybe they didn't really, but they said they got it to St. Hill size or whatever.
Most likely, yeah.
But what? So they just had the Universe Corps operating for a month and then just left?
Yeah. This literally happened in many, many different situations because auditors are rare and auditors are valuable. And if you were Miss Cabbage, where would you want to have your guys where they're making tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars, or auditing a bunch of Class 5 org staff that you had to prop up with a bunch of Sea Org members? Yeah. That's what happened.
All right, it's wild. Anyway, go back to what you were going to say before. You're going to drop a big bombshell.
I wrote this up on Facebook several months ago back in the spring, and I don't know if your podcast viewers have heard this or not, but the church has done away with all outside dictionaries.
Really? That is big.
Yeah.
So hold on a second, man. How can now hold on, you are this is almost like a troll level interview. Are you like you're dropping big bombshells in this interview of just like what the hell?
No, here, I'm going to do this. I can't make this shit up.
Okay, so where's so there's no Oxford dictionaries in the churches?
No, you can't take you can't take the OED, you can't take American Heritage, you can't take any of them
Are they selling their own dictionary?
They're selling their own dictionary with dinky dictionary definitions that apply only to the word in the particular thing that you're reading, whichever course pack or whichever lecture it is or whatever. So you dictionaries don't exist beyond what they sell. And from my understanding is it's basically a master glossary. So you can't look up different definitions of the word is. You can't look up different definitions or derivations of particular words or whatever. They've done away with it.
Okay, now hold on a second. So have they... hold on. So did they have a big event with Miss Cabbage running it and everything, saying, we've got our new dictionary and it's the ultimate dictionary? And
No.
No, what?
This was all done sub rosa, without any public fanfare or anything like that.
Wow, it must have been really controversial if they had to do it in a quiet way.
Yeah.
So, hold on. So, who made this dictionary? Who made this dictionary? And what's it called?
That's a good question. All I know is that my sources that are still in the church told me that there's no longer any other dictionaries allowed except the church-sanctioned, church-manufactured dictionary.
Church-manufactured. So do you think it's like this giant pilot / glossary or whatever dictionary that they've just compiled together or something, or?
Well, yeah, basically that's what it is that they've well, we have to kind of cut back to Scott Gordon's podcast that you did with him, because it kind of touches the tip of the iceberg with that. Because the thing is if you don't want people who are educated well enough to be thinking for themselves, and they're no longer a worker bee or a sheep or whatever you want to call it, when you have somebody in the church, they're dangerous. And that's one of the reasons why Scientology was taken out, because these people are aware, they're knowledgeable, they have higher IQs, they're capable, they can get things done. So what they have to do is they have to castrate them in any way that they can. And the way that they do that is they prevent them from having the knowledge of the English language, because that's where it all begins. And that's how they keep them in the box.
Okay, so you're saying that if you're going to study the student hat or something and you want to look up a word, right, you either look in the glossary specific for student hat, and I'm sorry, I'm not talking about a Scientology word, I'm talking about an English language word. So you look in the back. No, sorry, the church now has their own special dictionary for the student
words. Just words.
Okay, so hold on. So let's say you have MU on the word arrogant. How would you look it up in the course room now?
Well, let's say I'm, like I said, I haven't been in there to run this through myself, but my understanding is that they have words in the back of the particular transcripts for tapes. They have words in the back of the books. They have words that you'd have to look up, and they can use the particular, like let's say the word is. Well, you're going to look up the definition of that word is in the case of what it's used in the context of whatever course you're on. That's how they're doing this.
Yeah, but how are you, let's say with the word arrogant, where are you going to find the definition for that if you've taken away the Oxford dictionaries or the Webster dictionaries?
Well, they'll have a definition of arrogant as to how it's used in the particular context of whatever course it is that you're doing. Yeah, that's how they're doing it.
So they have some new dictionary or something where people will check this. They must have some new dictionary. So basically, maybe they've had problems for years with people looking up too many words and dictionaries being everywhere. So they've now said we've had it. We're just sticking with one big dictionary and that's it.
Yeah, it's an unusual solution. They're dumbing them down. They're putting fluoride in the water. That's how they're doing this. Now, here's the other part. With the advent of Louis Farrakhan...
Hold on, by the way, sorry, this is wild, man. I don't know if I believe you. Until I actually see this dictionary... But I think I know what you're talking about.
I'm not joking.
Because they're going to re-release the tech dictionary, re-release the admin dictionary, and now they've probably released this special dictionary that does away with all the Oxfords and the Webster's dictionaries and stuff.
Yeah, it's just it's all watered, dumbed down, because they want to just keep people in their particular peg hole. That's it. That's all there is to it, because they don't want thinking Scientologists. They want paying Scientologists.
Hey, sorry. Can I play the devil's advocate, right?
Sure.
When I was involved with the church, people... They took LRH's study tech too far, and they would be ridiculous with words. Like, they would look up the word stop or something, and they would just go way too far.
Case. Yeah.
Yeah. So I can understand that. I can see some definite workability in the fact of saying, you know what, stuff this bullshit you're doing, just one dictionary, that's it, keep it simple, and get the F up the bridge. You're messing around too much looking up the word but.
Yeah. Well, there are a lot of significant cases out there where people say, well, why do they call it blue sky? And they'll sit there and spin on it for 3 or 4 days or a week or whatever and not get through their check sheet. But the fact of the matter is LRH says the way you handle somebody like that is you just roll your sleeves up and you get them through it, and you word clear them, because they have a study bug, and it is very, very common, and it is very disconcerting, but you don't treat them any differently. You just clear up their words, and some of that phenomena is case, and you just got to audit them on it. But that's the way that it is. But the way Miscavige operates is he always comes up with this unusual solution to handle something that LRH had already figured out.
Yeah, yeah, I know, it's so silly. So yeah, I mean, the main reason I noticed that people were having problems when it comes to studying LRH is that either they're actually studying squirrel material, which is like the changes made to the basic books or whatever. I mean, I've seen how the church has messed up some lines in that book, and you read them, it doesn't matter how much you clear the word, the sentence has actually been messed up. Like they added an extra, like for example, I can't remember which book, but literally, you read the old version, the way LRH released the book, and you're like, okay, cool. And then you read the new version and you're like, what the hell is this new word? And you look it up and you just can't understand it because they've added in a new word into the sentence and it makes it almost impossible to understand. So you got students in the church in the course room reading LRH and they don't know it's squirrel, they don't know it's been changed, and they're hitting something and they're just stuck going, what the fuck? And it's because of the change that's been made to the materials, right? Which is just crazy because it doesn't matter how much you clear up the word. And then there's also the other big problem in the fact that they don't know the history of Scientology, and they weren't there in 1961 when LRH wrote that, and they're not a trained auditor or something, so they read something and they're like, what the fuck? This doesn't make sense. And it's not because they don't have an MU, it's because they have no idea what LRH is talking about because they weren't around in 1961 America driving a Ford T-Bird or some shit, using an old Matheson e-meter, and they just have no idea of the contents of the context of what LRH is talking about, and it goes over their head, and what they actually need is they need someone who's an experienced SIO who knows the history to walk down, read it, and go, oh, okay, this is what's going on, and then explain it to the person, which is kind of a bit weird as well. But, like, do you know what I mean? As in, it's just like, I came across it when I was studying Scientology in the church. It was just like, you read shit, and it's just like, it's not really necessarily because you got an MU, it's because you just have no idea about what LRH is talking about,
Yeah, well, and that is an issue, and it is something that, in my opinion, LRH didn't have the opportunity to afford himself time to address and take this data. Like if you were on the academy levels, like I was in the late 80s, and you're listening to these lectures from the briefing course, and they're just plucked from 4 years worth of lectures. I mean, sometimes you're just lost at what the heck is he talking about, because he's referring back to a lecture that was 3 days ago.
Yeah.
Or, this particular thing and all that stuff, and it's something that's missing that we need to help people with as much as we can and give them the understanding that the brief was a work in progress that ended up with LRH basically setting most of those auditing processes aside because they were too steep of a gradient for the PCs and steep of a gradient for the auditors, and he went back to the most workable technology that he had in order to get things done, because it was too difficult for people to deliver and too much for people to receive. Now, that's not to say that it didn't work. It did work. But the fact of the matter is that not many people could do it right. But beyond that, there is context, and the context needs to be presented to new Scientologists in a much better way than we did in the church in order to get people to understand the technology properly.
Well, a classic...
In answer to your question, in agreement with your statement.
Yeah, and a classic example would be like you'll be listening to an LRH lecture and suddenly everyone would laugh and you just didn't get the joke. And it's just like, that's a classic example of misduplication, because it's like you weren't around in those times and you don't exactly know what the hell they were talking about. That's why you didn't laugh when LRH said the joke. Whereas they were laughing back then in 1959 because they could get it because they were part of it. So it's just like the laugh test is basically a perfect example, because it's just like, how many paragraphs of that lecture have you been listening to that you actually didn't understand? You know what I mean? If you didn't get the laugh thing, there's probably heaps of things in that lecture or as well that you didn't understand. So it's just like, that's why with study, you just have to be careful, do it slow, and try your best to understand it. And that's just what you got to do. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, that falls into, and one of the datums, and you'll have to forgive me, I don't remember what the scale is called, but, Scientology is Greek for knowing how to know. And since LRH's departure, There's a bit of a scale that's been developed about competence, where you have unconscious competence, conscious competence, and all of that. And what it comes down to is whether you're a 20-year veteran of Scientology or you just got in last week, you don't know what you don't know, period,
Yeah.
whether it's about Scientology or anything else. And it's our responsibility to get people to understand that in the field, what LRH is talking about in these certain situations. Prime example, I bought a box set of George Carlin CDs that had all of his early work and everything that he did prior to becoming who he was back in the early 70s when he was on The Tonight Show and earlier shows. And it wasn't funny. It wasn't funny at all, you being a comedian, for the same reason, because I didn't understand the context of the era. And that is something that we really have to bridge a gap on when we're looking at almost 70 years since Dianetics and Scientology were formulated, that this gap is going to become wider and wider. And what you're seeing with this the dictionary removal in the church and everything is you're seeing the antithesis of that. They're trying to make it harder and harder. And the modus operandi that they're operating off of is if you can't dazzle them with brilliance, baffle them with bullshit. That's the MO of the Church of Scientology now.
It is amazing how they've managed to say that RTC is LRH, RTC is LRH, RTC is LRH. And they literally do that by they make sure if anyone's saying a success story at Flag or whatever, they make them say thank you to RTC. Otherwise, that person won't be allowed to say their speech at the event.
I believe
something
that.
like that. Yeah. So like they screen the person. So anyway, so this is how it's really clever how it works. You know what I mean? You do these little things like you make sure that the only success story winners can ones who mention, RTC or whatever.
It's sanitized.
Yeah, so basically they've just made RTC equal LRH. So then RTC says we're only going to use one dictionary, and then everyone says that's LRH, that's acceptable. It's really interesting.
Yeah, well, it's all based off of the data series, and there's one datum that isn't confidential on the NOTS materials where LRH talks about a missingness, and what he says is the hardest thing to spot is a missingness. And this is the datum that Miscavige uses day in and day out. There was a period back in the mid to late 90s where you used to get HCOBs that would come down the line, and they would have, and this was done for decades, when there were changes, there were revisions under the date as to what was revised, where it came from, and all of the revisions. And then eventually when he started revising things wholesale, those revisions being put on the revised document were omitted. So now you don't have a data trail for whatever the changes were, and they just started changing things wholesale. So it became psychotic. And then the tech stopped working, and gold tech was originated, and so on and so forth. Dan Kuhn could tell you all about that stuff.
All right.
But the thing is that it's changed and changed and changed and changed to the point to where it's almost unrecognizable.
Okay, so hold on, this is sort of another big bomb that you've dropped. So with the revision, so you're saying to me that that you basically can't see how many revisions a policy or a bulletin has actually had over its history, right?
No, not anymore, and that's what LRH would call a data trail. So you could pull the string on where these revisions were and what they were for and everything like that. I'm sure Dan Kuhn could give you the behind-the-scenes specifics, where I could only give you the effectual specifics of where now you don't know where the changes are. They just happen, and there's no crumb to follow, a crumb trail to follow as to why these things were changed and what for, and what format they were originally in. You couldn't go back to the old technical volumes from the 70s and 80s and follow it back to whether it was a board policy letter change or whatever. So that's when things started to get changed wholesale with the HCOBs a couple of years before Golden Age of Tech came out. And we started noticing that even in the late 80s, that it was happening.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't surprise me. I mean, when I heard when some of the OT stuff was changed, I imagine that things were just deleted and it wasn't actually properly recorded or anything. And it makes sense, but it is hard to believe, and it's pretty wild to believe. And you also mentioned something about TR0 bullbait being cancelled or something, and I just want to say before you mention it that I don't know if I believe any of this. You know what I mean? It's not like I know you personally or anything. So I'm just giving indies a platform to speak on, and you seem like a good indie, and it's this sort of stuff. So I mean, it's just because there's that problem of like, is this person just working for OSA trying to mess up the independent movement, and you never really know. Like I don't know what's going on with John Watson. By the way, I'll ask you about John Watson in a second after you mention this bullbait thing, but I'm just putting out information, and people have to work out their own truth. So tell me this bombshell about TR0 bullbait.
Well, I have a few sources who are still in the church, and I found out in January of this year that at the Flag Land Base, which is about to get blasted by Hurricane Irma at the time of this podcast.
Well, literally right now, I think. Or is it about to? It hasn't quite hit?
Yeah, it's still about 18, 20 hours away, but they're looking at maybe Category 3, possibly Category 4 direct hit.
No, but hold on. Yeah, but isn't it going on the East Coast and not going to be going to the West Coast?
No, the path changed within the last 36 hours, and it's going to basically barrel right on through Clearwater, Tampa, St. Pete, and they're going to get a direct hit.
What? That's another big bombshell as well, by the way. I know it's not live. It would be more exciting if it was live, but what the hell? Yeah, it's wild.
Yeah, well, so anyway, in January, I found out that they had deleted TR0 bullbait from all of the TR's check sheets because it was becoming politically incorrect. The main reason being,
God, sorry, that is big, because I'm not a fan of this whole political correctness and this whole left wing agenda and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah, neither am I.
And so to think that, I mean, I always thought that Scientology would be something that would, because I mean, maybe a tiny bit affected, but it's just like, oh no, it's gone so far. We've gone so politically correct these days. This is wild. Keep on going.
Yeah. Yeah. So the reason that it isn't politically correct, basically the premise is that the good buddies that Louis Farrakhan and Miscavige have become, it was getting in the way of the students who were doing training at the Flag Land Base. A vast majority of the outer org trainees at the Flag Land Base are Nation of Islam students who are then going back to their home organizations. And now there's even a loosely called Scientology Nation of Islam organization with a building in South Central LA. Compton is what I've been told. And they omitted TR0 bullbait from the check sheets because it was politically incorrect with the Nation of Islam students, and they were getting their feelings hurt on TR0 bullbait. And so Miscavige responded in kind and deleted it from all of the check sheets worldwide. I verified this with one of my boys who had done the survival rundown, which is also out tech, and I've since handled it with him, who was actually in the orgs and doing services, and he said, yeah, it's not on the check sheet anymore. So I verified it through family as well as a close friend.
So a close friend who's actually...
There's a lot of people in the church and was on the Flag Land Base a couple months prior to him telling me this in January.
So if you go to do... I can't even remember, actually, when I went to do SRD, I can't even remember if I actually had to drill bull baiting on that. I know on the old TRs and objectives course there was definitely bull baiting.
Yeah.
So in the new SRD, there's just no bull baiting in anywhere. Are you sure?
Yep. That's the deal.
That is so fucking nutty. Like that deserves a swear word. That's so wild. That is like that is so extreme. Like in the Scientology world, that is epic.
Yeah, that's pretty much akin to saying that, oh, I don't know. You know, if you were to take something from a biblical aspect and saying that Noah didn't really actually take the animals on the boat, he just took a couple, or the boat was a lot smaller than it was originally said it was, you know, it's one of these big fundamental things that is almost impossible to change. But this is how far this whole thing has gone, and I don't want to try and steer the podcast into the negative aspects of it, because that's not the point of why I'm telling you this. The point I'm telling you this is because a lot of the things that you've been covering with like Scott Gordon, for example, these things are coming to pass in the church. Big Brother is gutting the fish known as the Scientology technology, so that 20 years from now, it will be completely unrecognizable as you and I know it today.
Okay, this is just so much, because when GAT1 got released and when the definition of FN was changed and the way that they policed auditors on FNs changed, that was like an altering of the tech, and it was messing it up, and it was a really, I think the FN change was the worst thing ever for Scientology, to be honest. The worst. I think it's the most messed up thing. I think it's much worse than the bullbait thing, but that was like a shifty, sneaky thing. You know what I mean? Whereas this bullbait thing is honest. This is like direct changing of LRH. Like, this is just like, we don't do TR bullbait anymore. Like, this is just a delete. This is like, I imagine that, they had to do these shifty changes, and then they could get to a point where they could just do a big, bold thing like that, like just deleting TR0 bullbait.
Yeah, well, the thing is that it's an index of the society that we live in, that something like that has to be done. And it really tells you where Farrakhan's people are at, is that their confront is awful. Awful.
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
That's why it had to be done. And I hate to use the word again, but it is a castration of the communication technology and the drills that are literally the foundation of everything you do in Scientology. The world begins with TR0. That's
does.
An actual HCO. Yeah.
It's so
and
important.
These guys can't even do it.
It's an attitude towards life in that you don't care about what's going on in your environment. You can hold your ground and be yourself. You know, it's like it's the whole idea of not being effect. It's very important, and it's also just a lot of fun to do with someone else. So what? Some Muslim people got offended because someone was TR0 bullbaiting them and probably calling them a terrorist, and then they had to end TR0 bullbait.
Well, I think part of it probably came from the N-word being used.
Oh wow.
That would be my guess, and I'm not trying to be, This is where this comes from in this society, is that it's dangerous to speak your mind. It is dangerous to have any kind of opinion. It is dangerous to say words. I mean, and I just said the N-word because I didn't want to offend somebody, but I don't want to appear as a racist either. But the fact of the matter is that saying a word doesn't necessarily make you a racist. It's a word that exists in the lexicon of the English language that does have a questionable past. But this particular line of thinking goes with the dictionary, goes with bullbait and TRs. What's next? there's going to be something else that is yanked out that is part of the foundation of Scientology, because they don't, the powers that run Scientology, and it's not David Miscavige, don't want anybody to have any horsepower at all. And Scientology, as we know it, ceased to exist with these two moves, big time.
So what was this, the two moves? Sorry. So
you got the dictionary, and that you can't.
Oh yeah, exactly. The dictionary thing. So I forgot about the dictionary thing.
Yeah, it's just 1984.
But the bullbait thing's even way bigger. I mean, the dictionary was big enough, but the bullbait thing's taking it to it. It's just whoa. That is amazing. I mean, and like maybe LRH is sitting back listening to this interview, going, "Oh, I wonder what things are like in the future or whatever, 2017," and like he'll be sitting there listening to this, thinking he might actually be thinking, well, I actually thought things would be a lot worse by now. It's actually taken a lot longer for the SPs to completely, dwindle society down to this crazy condition.
It's a knee-jerk reaction of now I'm supposed to that Miscavige is on, because he's not part of the Scientology community. He's part of and I don't intend to offend anybody by saying this. He is part of the WOG non-Scientology world 110%. And he's doing whatever he can in order to take what he has and make it palatable for those who don't have confront, don't have any kind of an understanding of the English language. And he doesn't care, because it doesn't mean anything to him. He's not a Scientologist. He never was. So to him, it's sort of like changing the whole design of the Corvette and making it look different and saying, yeah, that's a Corvette. No, it's not a Corvette, because it doesn't look like a Corvette. It doesn't have the same lines. That's what he's doing. And it's just going to continue. And that's why it's that much more important for us to save the data that we have. And doing it digitally is not good enough. It needs to be, hard copy, or even better yet, put into
vaults,
like what the church supposedly did. Yeah, in metal or whatever, or acid-free paper, or in vaults. Because the thing is if we're not careful, there isn't going to be anything to come back to. That's my concern, because it's moving that quickly, not only in Scientology, but the dumbing down of society with, like we mentioned, fluoride, with the chemicals,
transgender.
It's
off its tips. I was listening to Alex Jones, and he was talking about, I think he somehow, what did he mention? He mentioned something about transgender. He mentioned how he goes, in Brave New World, the book or whatever, their plan is to make, the evil people's plan is to make everyone just one gender, like there's no more sexes, and then the government or whatever is in control of producing children, right? And Alex Jones was talking about it, and he goes, no, this is just part of their plan. This is part of their plan to promote transgenderism and to have no man, no woman, just this human, and that's it, and that human's just a slave. And he was just saying, he was just going, no, this is just part of their plan. He says they've written these things down. This is what the SPs want to do to Earth. And this is what's going on right now. They're promoting transgender, which is just so ridiculous. It's just epic. And also, I mean, just it's already, there's signs of it happening, but it's just around the corner. They'll be giving rights to pedophiles, and they'll be saying pedophiles should be accepted into society, and we should have pedophile tolerance. I hate this shit. I'm probably going to live the rest of my life fighting all this stuff, all this tolerance and all this political correctness stuff. It is wild.
Well, I don't disagree with you on any of those points. And, LRH talks about that sort of thing in numerous lectures, that, this sort of behavior, and he even talks about it in the Org Exec series, that Out 2D will kill an organization faster than anything else. Now, I'm not, and I'm going to be kind of funny here and use a Jerry Seinfeld ism, but if somebody is gay, they're gay, and there's nothing wrong with that, and that's part of the Seinfeld mantra in the show. Well, it's all dependent upon if you get your foot in the door that way, then the next thing is the transgender thing, and the next thing is the pedophile thing, and all of this stuff. And what you're looking at, and what you said, is very similar to The Handmaid's Tale. I don't know if you've read that book or watched the series.
What is it?
You got to watch it. It's awesome, because that shows you the ne plus ultra, the extreme, in other words, of how far a society can go in the fact that the entire society ends up being unable to procreate, and there's only a handful of women that can actually still have children. So they go way off to the far right, and it just becomes a totalitarian society where only a selected few men get to have sex with the women who are the handmaids, and they're the ones that have children, and the wives sit there while they're having sex with the handmaids. And this is the direction that the planet is going. And like LRH said, the second dynamic is ultimately the downfall of any society, like the Romans. They got so perverted and so far off track that they ended up folding up. And that's what's going to happen to this society if they're not careful. And they're perverting Scientology that much further. And I may sound like the world's most fundamental Scientologist. I'm not, by any stretch of the imagination. As far as the 2D goes, maybe I am. But I mean, as far as being an open-minded Scientologist in the field, I am one of the most open-minded Scientologists you'll ever meet. So I'm not crazy on this point, but the fact of the matter is if we don't do something about this and turn this thing around as Scientologists in the field, we're done as a society. And maybe not in our lifetimes, but we're done within the next 120 years. Because you're right, that's the direction this whole thing is going.
This huge dwindling spiral, it was slowed down with the internet. The internet's been a very, very good thing. But I still haven't called it in that. I've decided that I'm going to call it in 2020, right, if we're actually going to make it out of this. Because they're trying to shut down the internet. They're censoring, tons of my videos are censored. Every second day I get an email saying your thing has been labeled as shocking content. I mean, my avatar, I think my avatar review, right? I did a video review, the Avatar Spiritual Group, with me talking about it and stuff, and I don't even think I went into anything about conspiracies or anything, but then that got classified as being shocking content or whatever, because it's basically they just want you either selling Big Mac burgers or making videos about tea and cupcakes or something, or psych drugs probably,
right? Trivialities.
Yeah, like they basically just. I mean, the evidence is just huge for this. You open your eyes up and you look, and you just see how they just try and shut things down. Like they're trying to shut down YouTube big time. They hate it. They absolutely hate it. But yeah, I'm going to call it in 2020 because by then I'll know whether or not they've been successful in shutting down the internet. And I mean, they're not going to get rid of it, obviously, but they're going to try and have it so it's completely controlled somehow. And I'll know by 2020, but it's just crazy because there was some time there, maybe it was a year ago or when Trump was elected, I really got inspired and I was looking at the internet and I was like, you know what, we're going to make it. We're going to win this, and stuff has unfolded since then till, we've gotten to the point where I'm kind of like, and especially with this information you've just said in this interview where it's like, hold on, maybe we won't actually make it. Maybe we will actually go into what LRH was warning us about. It's wild to think, but yeah.
Well, I don't disagree with you on that, and I'm actually surprised that the internet has been allowed to exist as long as it has. And if it weren't for corporate interest and the Fifth Avenue interest as far as advertising and all of that stuff, I don't think that it would exist, because the internet doesn't even remotely resemble what it did back in 1994, 95 to 98 when broadband internet was introduced to most major cities in the United States. It's completely different, and it's completely been taken over by corporate interests. And when you get into the TPP aspects of it, and the throttling of information and having to pay to play and all of that stuff, it's really only a matter of time, I think, before they figure out to bury it in some bill, at least here in the United States, to where things are being censored again. And like you say, they already are being censored. Not necessarily, I mean, I haven't seen anything on my end or anybody that I know, but it wouldn't surprise me that is occurring with you. Australia is a completely different place than the United States.
Yeah, but it's YouTube or whatever. It's just YouTube land. They can do whatever they want, you know?
Yeah, they can. And you know, Google owns YouTube. And again, it comes back to the Knots datum of it's hard to spot a missingness. If something isn't there, you didn't know it was there to begin with as far as information. And that's why we have to protect the information that we have, because we've found Scientology documents in the torrents, Emule, and all this stuff that they've been proliferating, where there are big alterations in the PDFs. So they're actively working on perverting the technology outside of the church as well as in.
Oh, my God. Hold on a second. So they're not working outside of the church to modify the tech to make it the same as in the church, or are they just trying to change it to make it messy and dirty?
Well, they're trying to screw it up so that it doesn't work for us in the field as much as they are in the church.
Yeah.
If that to clarify.
I think I know what you mean. Like, so as in they're basically they're messing up the ability of people to download LIH tech outside the church.
Right.
Yeah. It's so wild. It's so wild. And you know, it's just so deep. It's just, I mean, and then you get this stuff where I've been looking into the whole alien thing so much because it's so important to understand that there's a universe with other beings out there, other planets or whatever, with beings out there and stuff. And it's such a it's been hidden from society. Like, they deleted the Wikipedia page for the word aliens, because they used to have a Wikipedia page that had like different types of possible aliens and stuff, and they got rid of it and they changed it to so that it redirects you to extraterrestrial life, which just talks about, you know, germs and possibility of life and stuff, which is twisting it, and no good information about the alien races and stuff. And then they offered you as well an option for fictional characters in movies for aliens or whatever. So because they're not just going to direct, you know what I mean? Anyway, they do these things that are just clever and sort of shifty, so the average person could just go and then they don't get as much of a shock, you know what I mean? But I mean, you know, I first heard about some of the Captain Bill stuff, the wild out there stuff about aliens and that sort of stuff, and I was just like, whoa, you know. But I was like, but hey, you know, this might be right. Like, I've seen evidence for this sort of stuff. And then I hear actual astronauts say, you know, no, the government's in communication with aliens, and like you find out that no, this really is true. Like, yes, it's secret, but it really is true, and it makes me appreciate so much that we have Scientology and we have things like Ron Zorg and stuff, and people like Captain Bill and that. It's just like, and what you're doing, it's just like, it makes you think that no, this really is the truth, you know, and we have a way to not become a slave.
Right, for a while. And then, you know, like LRH says, the constant willingness to fight back and all of that. You know, I mean, it gets a little old to me on planet Earth that everything is analogized to war. You know, the fight against crime, the fight against drugs. We have to go to war against this. And, you know, and we live in the dark ages. I mean, that's just the way it is, Andy. We live in the dark ages, and it's all relative. And somewhere down the track, we'll realize that Scientology was a good start. And that's what it is. It doesn't have all of the data. There's other applicable datums that can be used. But quite honestly, it gives you the ability and the path out to where you can start to look at things and realize, hey, this is a datum that really applies. And now I'm not saying that you have to be a Scientologist in order to find these datums. I don't think that's the case either. I think there are a lot of OT people out there who are really OT, and they didn't do anything in Scientology because they're just naturally that way. That may be blasphemy to some of the Class 8s and the Class 12s out there. I really don't give a fuck, because the fact of the matter is that this Scientological dogmatic blindness needs to come to an end.
Yeah, it does.
And what's required is open your fucking eyes and take a look at this stuff. Both the CBR materials, if it's true for you, it's true for you. I've done Excalibur. I'm basically ready to do the Phoenix. I just need to start doing it. And the wins that I had on Excalibur and the OT life repair and everything were far greater than any of the case gain that I had gotten on OT VII, and I was on 7 for 16, 17 months. It is the next logical step. Are there other steps that one could take? Yeah, you could do one of the 3 or 4 flavors of OT VIII out there. That's fine. But the fact of the matter is that part of the data in Excal and everything was Robertson's viewpoint of how things were going on, and there's a lot of valuable information on there, including None Dare Call It Conspiracy. If you haven't read that, read it, Andy.
Yeah, it's good, yeah. I mean, I think I've read, I think maybe the first few chapters or something, but yeah, it's written in like 1972, and it's good conspiracy information.
And the author was killed shortly after he published it, so that's a good validation of the fact that what he was talking about was the sooth, if you will. But the thing is that the only way people are going to get out of the mess that they're in is in Scientology, the technology outside of the church, is one of those ways, and it will enable people to make the right decisions and perceive and find the other breadcrumbs, if you will, out there that allow them to progress further. And in the United States, the Excal CBR stuff is third-partied, and it's third-partied for a reason, because it works, just like Scientology is. And if people don't snap out of it, they're going to lose the opportunity to do that too. It's
wild. And for people listening to this who aren't Psyos, which some people actually aren't, which I find really interesting, because it's like, how can they follow along if they don't know what the fuck we're talking about?
Yeah.
But seriously, they do. Look, just get into it. I'll just say, just get into Scientology. Just get in, because it is. I believe it's a red pill, like the Matrix. Like, it wakes you up to what's really going on, and it can be sort of confronting. But at least you're not the one who's going to end up having a kid that's been brain damaged by vaccines, because you were switched on to what's going on in the world, and you started to open up your mind to information and stuff, and you started to go, whoa, maybe I shouldn't trust Big Pharma. Anyway.
Yeah. Wow. Well, it's all a matter of, it's all relative in everything. Relativity is key. And people, if you're listening to this and you haven't done Scientology and you're curious about the subject, there's one good way to find out what Scientology is about. And this is something that Ron Hubbard came up with. It was in a lecture that he delivered in the 60s. And all you have to do is go back and think about a pleasure moment that you had when you were a kid. And whatever it was, whether it was an amusement park, or you're at the beach, or it was a birthday party and you're blowing out your candles on your cake, or, kissing a girl for the first time, or whatever. Take a look at that particular picture, mental image picture that you have in your mind. And what we want you to do is we want you to look at it and realize where you're looking at it from. Are you looking at it from outside of your body? Because if you are, that's you. That's what a Thetan is. That's your spirit. That's your essence. You aren't your body. And you'll see that a lot of the pictures in your life are from an exterior viewpoint. And that's what Scientology is all about, dealing with you as a being, not the body, because anything you deal with on this planet, maybe with the exception of Buddhism and maybe a couple other isms besides Scientology, are going to want to make you stay in that trap called the body.
Yeah,
that's what Scientology is all about.
And I think, I don't even mean to bag Christians, but I think you can get some help from it, but I don't think that it really gives you the truth about life, and it really makes you into an operating spirit, which you are. You are a spirit, you know what I mean? And you don't I don't know, you don't need the body, you know, and there's evidence for this, you know, and people don't know this. People don't know that you can actually gain this ability, right, where you can leave your body and go look in your neighbor's garage and see what's in there. I mean, this is actually what do you think, ghosts are? This is actually true. This is just, it's true. It's really wild. And I just want to mention two quick things, right? For people who heard that Scientology is bad in the media and all this sort of stuff, it's like, well, yeah, because there are some corrupt things going on with the church, but it's just like, there's a reason you're actually hearing about Scientology being corrupt in the mainstream media, right? Because they can just get away with just trashing it. You know what I mean? Like, they like something controversial, and they love to report on controversial things, and they're not going to get attacked if they have a go at Scientology. Like, it's free reign. They can go at it, even though OSA apparently is supposed to be stopping these attack pieces, but they're just not. But do you notice how
it's all an enigma wrapped in a riddle surrounded by a question, you know? It's all a big op. There's several different layers to the onion.
Yeah. Well, like, as in, mean, what's going on with the church, or?
Yeah, what's going on with the church and how it's been taken over by portions of the IRS or individuals in the IRS.
All the CIA.
You know,
I mean, it's wild, but hold on, but think about the government though. Think about the government though, because it's just like, I mean, the government, and when I say the US government, Australian government, whatever, they've done horrific shit. Like, I mean, they have done the wildest stuff. But guess what? You don't hear about it. Why? Why do you think that's the case? Because the government's in control of the media. The CIA have assets in the media. That's why you're not hearing. You only hear about it on freaking Alex Jones's shit. You know what I mean? You don't hear it on CNN or BBC or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, why? Because the government is in those mainstream media things, and they're covering up all the horrific shit that's going on. What I'm saying is, to the average person, is if you actually knew what the government was doing, then when you see something by Chris Shelton that's attacking Scientology, you'll just be like, well, that's kind of bad, but it's nowhere near as bad as the government. You know what I mean? The government. What I'm saying is, the government's so big and so powerful that they are controlling the information that you find out about. But the church isn't that big and isn't that powerful that it can't control the information. So you end up hearing about the fucked upness of the church, but you're not hearing about the fucked upness of the Navy or the US government or the Food and Drug Administration or whatever. It's so wild.
Right. Well, it's all a matter of misdirection and Machiavellianism, where you divide and conquer, and you get all of these different sectors fighting against each other. And it's becoming much more palpable here in the United States that they're pushing the racism button. They're pushing the transgenderism button, and that it's okay to be everything but straight.
But a white male, yeah.
Yeah, and I've traveled the United States for the last 25 years in my line of work, both as an auditor and with my own businesses. And I have seen and been to so many places where I've been there and I'm gone for a couple of years, sometimes maybe longer, 5-10 years. And I come back, and these towns, the middle class is being ripped out by the roots. They're being bankrupted by one scandal or another, and the bank bailouts, to where there isn't going to be a middle class, and there's going to be the incredibly rich 1% and the incredibly poor 98% before too long in the United States. I can't speak for Australia or other countries, but the United States, for all practical purposes, has become a third world country.
Yeah.
We have and if you've never been to a third world country, you go to a third world country and things don't work. Signs aren't repaired, roads aren't repaired, things are in disarray.
It's just a crazy society. It's just not organized, and it's just
everything's falling apart. And LRH had his finger on this back in the 50s even, and it was later introduced as the way to happiness. But the thing is if you look at the way to happiness, you one for one on these particular tenets. And I'm not trying to get all hokumish here on the podcast, but it's the truth. It comes down to things like treating people with respect, respecting your elders, brushing your teeth, washing your armpits and your crotch, things like that. I mean, these things used to be givens in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. And just since the late 80s, things have gone to hell in a handbasket where you have to take a pill for everything that causes more problems, and then you have to take more pills, and so on and so forth. And it is literally going to hell in a handbasket overnight. And Scientology has a lot of those solutions, and it's readily available for free on the internet while it's still there, folks. So get involved, look into it. And if it's true for you, it's true for you. If it's not true, don't bother with it and go do something else. But I guarantee you that if you look into it and you look under the hood, you'll find that sanity is right there available for you. You just have to grab it.
Yeah, the third world example is really good because they're just more fucked up than the Western countries, and so when you go there, you get an idea of of how it can get worse, and then you look back at your own country and you see how, the evil people are trying to make, the Western countries like these third world countries. You know what I mean? Where people just have to work. They just have to work all day and all night to just pay the bills, and they never get anywhere, and it's just a complete trap. But this is why it's like traveling's really good. It gives you perspective and understanding. Because I remember when in Australia we've got this thing that the government's released, and of course it's a program by the government, so it's just completely messed up. It's this thing called broadband thing, some big broadband deal, fibre optic broadband or whatever. And of course, what's it costing? Billions of dollars, heaps of money to set up this broadband internet thing all over the country, right? And now that it's sort of getting completed or almost finished, it actually means that the internet is slower. Do you know how retarded that sounds? As in, to think that and you have to switch to this new internet, by the way, as well. So to think that you got this government program to set up this, spending all this money, and you actually change onto it, and your internet's crapper, right?
Yeah, that
is so retarded. And when I found that out, it reminded me of the third world country. In that you go into a third world country, and the electricity suddenly goes out, and you're like, why is the electricity just cutting out? Why is it so stupid and retarded in this country that the electricity is cutting out? And so now Australia is turning into this, in that you go on the internet and you're like, well, the internet's kind of crappier. Why did the government spend billions of dollars to set up something that is actually making the internet worse? It's just wild.
Well, one of the things that I can tell you about this phenomena on a global scale is one of the things that gets handled on OT VIII that LRH developed, which is one of the upper levels. And I know you know this, but maybe our listeners don't. This is a fundamental, and this is something that has been perpetrated throughout this particular region of the galaxy, and that everybody on this planet, for the most part, has as a part of them, as a being. It's almost part of their fiber, and it can be handled on the OT levels. I'm not kidding you. This black is white, white is black, yes is no, bad is good, good is bad. All of that stuff is all part of this material. And this guy, LRH, L. Ron Hubbard, figured this out back in the 1960s. And it's part of the reason why Scientology has been corrupted and perverted and subverted and wiped off the map, as some of us older timers, if you will, know it, is because this stuff works.
Yeah,
Plain
it's a real
and
deal.
simple.
It's a real deal. It's just like we are living in, let's just use the analogy of the Matrix. We are like living in a Matrix, and this is actually a way out of the Matrix, Scientology. And so it's just absolutely been attacked, and this dictionary thing, this bull baiting thing you've mentioned is just like, they hate it. They just...
Yeah.
They can't handle it.
It's one of the reasons why we put together the Meter Reads film, because the e-meter is another thing that they've messed with to the point, I don't know if you know this or not, that the new e-meters that they put out, which we use in auditing, the meters, the Mark 8 e-meters that the church put out after hanging on to them for several years in a warehouse.
Because they produced too many of the older versions of e-meters, and are probably waiting to sell out of them or something. You know what I mean? Like the 1996 Quantum Mark 7 or whatever. They'd probably made so many of them that they were like, "Fuck, we have to wait till we release this new one until we sold more of the old one."
Yeah, they had to get rid of the old stock before they could put the new ones in. And what they've done with the new ones is they have a router in the new e-meters. This is very Big Brother 1984-ish. That
it is. Yeah.
If you aren't in good standing, they can shut your e-meter off via the internet, just like your phone. If you don't pay your bill, they shut you off so that you can no longer spiritually progress up the Scientology bridge, or their version of the Scientology bridge, in parentheses and quotes, until you've become Johnny, a good boy again.
Now, hold on a second. What if you don't have Wi-Fi turned on in your house or whatever, or you don't connect your e-meter up to Wi-Fi?
Then your e-meter doesn't work.
Oh, that's really clever. So it forces you to go on the internet to get... So then, and then, as soon as once you connect to the internet, then they've shut it off, so it turns off your e-meter.
Right. It's one of the ploys that most any of the big corporations have with any of their software. Microsoft, Adobe, they all have callback code in them that calls back to the mothership, if you will, or the mother server. And so that's how they've got it now, is that you are a number, and that number is assigned to you with your e-meter. And if you're not good, and you haven't bought enough book packages, and you haven't done what they said, and you're not basically the lapdog that they want you to be, then you can no longer spiritually progress up their bridge.
Yeah, and of course they don't announce this little extra thing in the special events to release the e-meter. They don't say it's got this function in it.
Right. Well, and see, that's the thing is they don't want to announce a lot of these things, because there still are a lot of intelligent Scientologists who are under the ether and just aren't willing to look because they're afraid of losing their spiritual salvation, they think. But that's the deal, is that they're really afraid of losing what parishioners they do have left, but there aren't many left. And it's only a matter of time before the whole thing comes crumbling down. Or what they'll do, like they are with the Nation of Islam, is they'll turn it into something else, and then they'll take the Nation of Islam, and it's no longer has a name of Scientology. It's coming from another aspect, because they're not training any of these guys in the Nation of Islam beyond anything beyond simple Dianetics procedures and things like that, because it's really hard to screw something like that up. That's pretty much all Miscavige can do now is the simple stuff. I don't know if you knew this, but they removed all of the technical volumes out of every course room on the planet. They no longer have a set of Scientology technical volumes in any course room, flag included. They don't exist anymore in the course room.
So they're just in quorum with the CS.
Well, they've shut down the Class 8 course rooms. They've shut down the Class 6 course rooms, both of which are in your advanced orgs. They don't train any class 12, 10, 11, and 12. They don't train any of these guys that deliver the L's at flag. They only train them on one given L rundown. They don't train them on all three because they don't want the cat let out of the bag anymore.
Because they don't want someone becoming an indie auditor that it's like, I can do all the L's.
Right. So basically what they've done is they've neutered and spaded the technology utterly and completely with these particular moves. And the technical volumes, supposedly they were going to revamp the technical volumes because their copyrights ran out on the technical volumes because they were introduced in 1991. So they pull them all out of the course rooms and they haven't returned them in any form yet, and they probably never will.
And this is what your insiders are saying. Your insiders are telling you this.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the tech balls have been gone for over 2 years.
Jesus.
So you don't have
hold on a second. I'm trying to think when I left. I don't even think I left 2 years ago, and they were still there.
There's been an evolution to pull them out of every course room on the planet for about 2 years now. Some course rooms, because it's a target that they need to get them out because it's a legal rudiment that these things be removed because the copyrights are no longer valid. Which then you get into all of the copyright stuff that when they change things, the only thing that is still valid is the changes. That's the only thing they can copyright. They can't copyright the old material because now it's public. It's in the public domain.
Oh, that's really interesting. So they have to squirrel in order to get the copyrights.
That's right. You got it, Andy.
All right. So anyway, so we covered the tech vol thing. I'll got one quick question right about the LAOG. So really, it's quiet. It really is quiet right now.
Yeah. It's a mausoleum. So's AO. So's ASHO. I had a friend of mine just drove by there the other day, and there wasn't a body on the sidewalk, a body on the steps of ASHO, and there used to be. Yeah, there used to be 40, 50 people on those steps at any given time having a conversation with each other. Not anymore.
So you mean like what, back in the 90s or something?
Oh, no, I mean even 10 or 15 years ago.
I think since GAT1, the stats really started going down as a whole.
Yeah.
So I imagine that it's really become really noticeable in the past 10 years how many people have left.
Yeah. Here's an interesting statistic. When I was in Florida in 2003, a friend of mine who knew some of the upper echelon people after the Golden Age of Tech had been released in 1996, he was telling me, he was a grad 5 auditor and I was a class 4 auditor at the time. He said, do you know, Jonathan, that you are one of 7 people who is now continuing to do your auditor training over again in the Clearwater, Tampa, St. Pete area out of all of the trained auditors that live in those 3 towns? That would be Tampa, Org, Flag, a couple missions and things like that. Only 7 people decided to re-up and get back on their auditor training because they took everybody's certs away with Golden Age of Tech 1. 7 people.
What year was this?
And this was 2003.
So hold on. But since 1996 when it was released up until 2003, are you telling me it was only 7, or was it just in that year 2003 it was 7?
It was, from what my understanding was at that time, there were only 7 people who were redoing their auditor certs with Golden Age of Tech out of tens of thousands of people who were trained auditors. That's all that were actually on lines at Tampa Org doing anything to get their certs back with the Golden Age of Tech, because all of the others had given up and were invalidated.
So for the Tampa public, you're saying They released GAT1, and only 7 people had sort of bothered to go back and get retrained. Yeah, it makes
from 96 to 2003. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Everybody else just walked away.
Yeah, because everyone would have just been like, "What the fuck?" And the And I imagine what do you think the stat would be for GAT2 then? Do you think it would just be 1 person probably?
Well, here's the deal. Miscavige, not Scientology, because it isn't Scientology, it's Miscavige and his cronies. CST, which is the board of directors, of which none of the board of directors of CST are Scientologists. I don't know if you knew that or not. These guys, what the datum that they operate off of is tomorrow's sucker, is that there's always another person that's going to walk through that revolving door and come in and say that they need help and they want to get fixed and they're reaching for something more. So the average time that a new person spends in Scientology is less than 2 months, and they're out the door and gone.
Wow.
That's how short of a cycle of the revolving door it's been in the last 10 years. They don't stay very long because even the new guys see the outpoints in the organization.
Okay, hold on quickly. So with the steps for the ASHO, so you used to drive past it like around the year 2000, and there would actually be like 50 people hanging out in that area, and now there's like no one.
Yeah. There's nobody out there on the steps because they've crushed the ARC within their own ranks completely. There's no ARC. Everybody's afraid to talk to everybody else because they might get written up.
I know, it's so wild. And do you know what? Maybe you can answer this question if you know about this. But apparently, with these ideal orgs, when a new person walks into the ideal org, they tour the public display area, and apparently, apparently, you get in that area, you get inspected by OSA or something to see if you're an SP. And if you're an SP, like let's say if you're Chris Shelton, right, and he walks around those public display areas, and he's going to an ideal org that's in Australia, so no one will know him, right? Actually, who works for the org. So they walk through the public display area, and somehow OSA takes photos, or they somehow check, and they find out that you're an SP, and then you get asked to leave. Have you heard about that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is really true because when I was in working at the Ideal Org, maybe they hadn't instituted this, but there was ever any talk about there being cameras that are spotting if someone's an SP in the public display area. I never heard anything about that.
Yeah, well, the way they do it at Flag is you need to be a card-carrying IAS member to even set foot on the property, and then they run it through the system over the radio. To make sure that you're in good standing, etc., and so on. And
what about a normal Ideal Org then? Because I know that who's the guy? He's a Scientology hater, but he's a bit friendlier. He's the gay guy, Stephen Mango. This is what he said, and I was watching a video and I've spoken to him, and he was saying how he tried to sneak into an Ideal Org, and it was the one that was like Orange County, I think, and they found out he was an SP because he was in the display area, and he reckons the only way they could have found out is if they took photos of him in the public display area and checked with OSA, and OSA communicated back and said no, he's an SP, and then he got kicked out.
Yeah, with the advent of the internet technology, as quick as things are, that wouldn't surprise me. 20 years ago. 18 years ago, something like that, you could get away with it. I don't think you could get away with it now, just for the fact that, you can look up somebody's name unless you have falsified identification that says your name is something else, unless they have facial recognition technology, which I wouldn't put past them. But, their ranks are growing so small so quickly, and to get people to know how to use that technology in a Class 5 org would be really shocking to me. I could see it in an advanced org, but not a Class
I think it must be facial recognition technology, like in Facebook, where it recognizes who the people are in the photos that you upload or whatever. It must be that. And so,
like that.
So whenever someone new comes in, they intentionally go, here, you have to look at these panels and walk around and stuff. And during that, I imagine you come across facial recognition technology. And then if you are an SP, then it triggers something in OSA. Then they send a communication down to HCO probably and say something like, there's an SP in Div 6 or whatever, he has to get out. I think that, that's amazing though, isn't that just like, whoa? Talk about New World Order and special security and stuff. It's just like, whoa.
Yeah, well, they covet the people that they have, and they're really trying to stop the leaks because their own overts they're obsessed with their own overts, period, and they have to do anything they can to hide them now more than ever. We could get into the Leah Remini stuff and all of that, but they're in trouble, big trouble, and they have to keep the people that they have because they're the low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, it's amazing. I want to cover things because you mentioned this earlier, right? You mentioned SRD being OutTech, the survival rundown. Why is it OutTech? Because didn't L. Ron Hubbard release it in the late 70s?
No, it was never anything that the SRD was not written by LRH. And when LRH found out about it, he was very upset and canceled it that same day because it wasn't an LRH issue. And what happened is that, and this is what's happened a lot, is Miscavige is running out of things to release because there's only a finite amount of data that they can use to turn into something to resell again or something new. And the SRD was one of these things that was in the original 1970s tech vaults, and it was written by another. It was given to LRH. He was furious about it and canceled it that day. So what happened is they still had copies of it, and the SRD that the church is delivering now is far different than the SRD that LRH canceled. So it's a lot worse. And there have been dozens of people who have died from being so overrun on what they call the SRD because it doesn't even resemble what the original SRD looked like. Hold on a second.
What do you mean people have died?
People have died from being on it. I know 3 people myself who have died while on the SRD, which is
Are you talking about the one that they released in 2014 or the older version?
The more recent version that they're still selling now. Because what you're doing on the survival rundown, here's the deal. Objectives, for example, which is part of the survival rundown, objectives are only run until the person has a cognition, and you're not going to have an FN per se. You get the person on the meter, like if you're doing regular objectives, and you'll get an FN. But what they're doing is they're basically grinding the thetan, the spirit, the being, for those who don't know what a thetan is. They're grinding the thetan into the physical universe because the objectives weren't meant to be run for hundreds upon hundreds of hours. Each objective in its own right should only be run for at the most a few hours, depending upon the person's case state, at most. And what they're doing is they're running people on objectives for hundreds of hours at a time, which is such a gross misapplication of LRH's original intent with the objectives processes. I can't think of anything that would be worse. And it's killing people.
You've really pushed me on this last one. I think this was just I'm putting a big disclaimer at the start of this interview, by the way. Seriously, I mean, you're making a big statement here. You're saying people have actually died in the past few years on this new SRD.
Yeah, I've known 3 people I know
How do you
people
die doing SRD? It's just subjective processes. Explain to me how you die.
Well, it's simple, because objectives processes are only meant to bring a person into communication, control communication and happiness into their environment, and put them into present time and bring them out of the backtrack with their attention stuck on things. But when you run these things for tens or hundreds of hours on someone, you're really messing the being up, because what you're doing is you're plowing the person under as a being. You're overrunning them. Every process in Scientology has an end phenomena. Scientology process is FN, floating needle on the E-meter, cognition, VGIs, which is very good indicators. They feel good about their cognition, their realizations, their what's the word? There's another term for it, but escapes me. But you have a fundamental realization about life. Hey, wow, I'm more in present time. I never really realized that things were really here. I never realized that there was a finite amount of space that I could set that bottle down, and had a temperature and it had a specific weight. I never thought about that before. These are the types of realizations that people have, and some people might say, well, I already know that. Well, there's a different sort of awareness that comes with it when you do these particular processes. But when you do these sorts of processes for long durations of time, you're overrunning the being. And when you overrun somebody, you really mess them up as a being. This is what the three-swing FN does in the church. This is where Miscavige got the idea for this. Because to the degree that you plow somebody under as a being, what does that give the church? It gives them the opportunity to fix you and to spend more money on repair auditing that plows you under further. That's how this guy works. This is suppressive black Scientology and black Dianetics at its worst.
And so how does someone die when they're doing an objective process? Like, what do you mean? Like, as in they get cancer from it or something?
The people that I know, one up and died and had a coronary, and they were in their 40s and healthy. They jogged. They didn't have any body problems. They just one day up and died, went to see their mother and died. Another one, it was, it's just these weird body problem things that come out of the blue, because when you do objectives, you're not just auditing the thetan, you're also auditing those inhabitants of the body that you coexist with, that LRH calls genetic entities. And these guys don't respond well to this sort of a thing, because it's a composite thing. When you're auditing a composite being, you're not just auditing the thetan. You're auditing all of the other guys in the car with you.
Yeah.
The genetic entities, for example. That's as far as I can go with it.
Yeah, it talks about them in the history of man.
Yeah, a lot of this stuff in the history of man. They can't have this stuff, this overrun. And this overrun basically gives them the feeling that they want to give up. And they go into apathy and the body dies. Period. That's how this works. So the SRD has been screwing people up now for several years, because what they're calling the SRD isn't even recognizable as the original SRD that was written by somebody else that LRH canceled. That's how far down the line the whole thing has gone.
It is. I mean,
and I've had to clean up many people who were on the SRD. Now, that being said, and notwithstanding, Andy, I am not auditing you, and I am not trying to indicate anything to you about what you did as an SRD yourself. So don't go there. Don't dive into it, okay? Don't worry about it. You're doing fine.
Yeah. I've managed to key myself out
yeah.
from the outtake, but yeah.
So that's another bombshell.
That is pretty big, because I'd heard that, that it used to be around and they got rid of it. And I thought that getting rid of it was the squirreling. And then, but I mean, yeah.
No, it was squirreling.
Yeah, squirrel to begin with. just quickly, give me a quick answer to this. What makes you know that it was written by someone else?
Because I've spoken to the people that were around at the time and were in the room when LRH got pissed about it.
Jesus, whoa.
They were on the line at the time. It doesn't get any better than that. Now, of course, you can only take my word for this particular item, and I strongly suggest to all of the listeners and yourself that if it isn't true for you, it's not true for you, and you need to look into these things yourself, pull the strings, do the interviews. I know a lot of the things that I know because I do a podcast just like you do, and I did these radio shows back in 2009. I met these people doing radio shows. My wife, Carrie, and I traveled all over the country, meeting people, interviewing people. I met Marty Rathbun. I've met Mike Rinder. I could tell you stories about all of that. I've met all of the major players in the field, and I have a pretty good bead on what's going on. And a lot of it, there's some really good people out there doing some really good things, but it's not a pretty picture, and the field is a mess. It's a big third-party, suppressed mess, and a lot of it has to do with a lot of these ops that you talked to Scott Gordon about. It really is in sad shape.
This has been quite the key in interview almost. It's just like, whoa. I mean, this is, and I wasn't saying it earlier to start. I was saying that part of the journey towards truth is that you find out shit that's like, what the fuck, and it can be upsetting. But it's where you have to go until you have to keep on going to find out the truth. It's the point.
That's right. You got to pull the strings, and I've pulled a lot of strings. You're pulling a lot of strings. A lot of the people that you've interviewed are pulling the strings. But the thing is that we all have to get together and we have to share this information. We have to get along with each other. We have to set aside our differences, and of all empirically, all things, all bias needs to be set aside, because if we don't do this soon, there isn't going to be anything left for us to put together. And I'm not doom and gloom or anything like that. I'm just saying, like LRH says, this is a tough universe, and only the tigers even have a hard time surviving. We need to be tough. We need to be fair. We need to work with one another, set our biases aside, roll our sleeves up, pull the strings, put all of this data together in one room, get all of the trained guys together, audit each other, clean each other up, and get something going in loose groups where we stay in communication, not on the internet, not on cell phones, because the powers that be that want to take this stuff out have got us all monitored. Period, paragraph.
Yes,
they know what we're doing.
And the internet's I mean, even I, as a comedy sketch, uploaded a thing pretending to be a transgender and stuff, and it was just a little joke thing. And even that, I got my computer played up after that, and I got some hacking or something on my computer after that. And I was just like, what the hell? Like, it was just making fun. It was, making fun of political correctness or something. And I don't know who I offended or something, but it was just like, the video got banned on Facebook, and then my computer played up. Like, I got a little virus thing after that. And it's just like, this wasn't me interviewing Scott Gordon, exposing the secrets of the church and leaking OSA documents, right? Which I achieved, which I got weirdness on my computer as well. I got, hacking or something going on there as well. But this was just a stupid comedy sketch of me pretending to be a transgender, and it had nothing to do with Scientology. It had nothing to do with this podcast or anything. And even that, like, something weird happened there. It was just like, whoa, the whole internet's monitored or whatever, and it's just like, if you're out of line on anything, they don't like it. Quickly, I must have as-is this, but recently I was thinking about the podcast, and I was thinking how I'd sort of understood fully what was going on with Scientology and the church and everything, and I was thinking, oh, it's going to be kind of boring just, looking into the future, continuing doing these interviews and stuff. And then, I speak to you today, and it's like, oh my God, it's just like it doesn't. You know what I mean? There's still stuff. I was thinking, like, what am I even going to ask you? You know what I mean? It's just like, and then I go and I speak to you, and it's just like, what the hell? Like, it's just, as these things kind of interesting, Yeah,
well, confront is again, to use the expression, relative. And that is something that even your most hardcore OTs, I mean, I could tell you stories that, they would be a little bit of an affront to the people that the stories are about, and they would know who I was talking about. But it is ultimately a matter of confront, and it's not just confront.
Affront means offense, by the way. Affront means to offend someone. I'll just quickly say that. Keep on going.
Well, yeah. Oh, and I'm talking about confront, like TR0 confront. But it is an affront to somebody who is an OT, to use the word that you came up with. It is an affront to somebody who is an OT to tell them that they don't have a clue. Okay? And that's the reason Scientology, the Church of Scientology, is in the shape that it's in. Because when you tell somebody that the church that they're in has been lying to them, has been stealing from them, has been misleading them about things, that all of their friends are a part of it, and they're unwise to it and everything, these OTs will drop you like a hot potato and never have a thing to do with you again. The same thing applies to people who are independents or free zone Scientologists or whatever. There are very few people, especially in the United States, when you start getting into the XCal and CBR stuff and all of that stuff, because they think, well, he's just a guy with a feather in a cap who wore a cape and blah, 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 and he was nuts and he sold LRH down the river and all this jazz. And the thing is that with all of the data that LRH gave people, with the data series as far as investigations and third-party tech, the ethics conditions, all of this stuff, these people do not use this technology almost literally at all, because they've already fallen back into their old habits of not being a Scientologist when they're in the field, and they're not thinking with this information. They're not applying it in real time to their own counterparts in the field. And so you get this division, you get this unhappiness where one CS doesn't trust the other CS, and nobody will share PC folders. I mean, it just goes on and on and on and on and on. And if this is going on with the technical terminals in the field, can you imagine what's going on with the people who aren't tech trained?
Mm. Yep.
And it can be changed, and it can be changed through communication and confront. And it's going to take a lot more confront for everyone in the field in order to keep things righted and keep the ship afloat. And people are going to have to take responsibility. Stop whining about all of the horrible things that people have done to them in the church and how badly they want the flag land base to be torn down by a hurricane. All of this stuff, and they're going to have to grow up and get a fucking clue, because if they don't, the next several billion years are going to suck. That's my viewpoint, and you can call me hard or you can call me a nut, but the fact of the matter is LRH knew what he was doing. This tech works, and it is your ticket to understanding that there is more than one universe, and you are a part of it. There are many universes. This guy knew what he was doing, and this is a brief breath in eternity, like he says, for you to get righted and realize what part of the game you're playing, and it's a much bigger game than you might think.
It's really epic. Okay, we're going to end the interview, but the last thing I'm going to say to you, let's say, so someone's listening to this, and they're a church member, or maybe they're an indie and they think that your tech's not standard or whatever. Like, what would you say to the question that you might be a squirrel? Like they're like, oh well, this guy's just doing his own thing, trying to wear all these hats when he's handling a PC, and it's impossible, and you have to have an org this guy's just a squirrel. What would you say to that?
I would say that the only way that you can find out whether I'm a squirrel or anybody else is a squirrel is to arm yourself to the teeth with the tech. If you aren't tech trained and you haven't rolled your sleeves up, cleared your words, and ultimately, more than anything else, if you can't be honest with yourself, you've got no business being a Scientologist. None. Because you can't get up the bridge if you aren't honest with yourself. Be honest with yourself. Get trained. Become a class 4 at a minimum. You can do the OT levels for a few $1,000s standardly. Get it done, and when you get done with OT V, OT VII, you're going to realize that there's more to do, and that LRH started it, and it's your job to finish the bridge. And he said himself, for God's sakes, build a better bridge. He literally said that. And that is yours and my and everybody else's job, and it is not an easy one. And when you start doing it, you'll realize all of the counter intention that this guy had and what a gift the bridge really is. And it is diamonds for literally peanuts. Don't take my word for it. Get up the bridge, run, don't walk. Then listen to this broadcast again.
Wow. Yeah, you got to listen. You got to study things twice, because when you get experience and then you read it again or whatever, listen to it again, it all makes sense.
Yeah. Number of times over equals certainty.
Yeah, and you have to collect experience between those times. That's really important as well. So thanks for speaking to me. I want to speak to you again. I can't believe the things you said in this interview. It's wild. It has been a bit interpolating and stuff. Anyway, we didn't even cover any of the stuff I wanted to cover, really. But
yep, it's a hot subject, Scientology, in and out of the church.
Yeah, it's wild. Anyway, thanks for speaking to me, John Burke.
Happy to be here.
All right,
thanks for having me.
Bye. All right, so that was it for the interview with Jonathan Burke from the Advanced Organisation of the Great Plains. I hope you liked it. I thought it was pretty fun. It was pretty fun, and I'm trying to think. I think part 1 with Scott Gordon was better. I think that was pretty exciting. I don't know what... I don't know. This was definitely up there. Okay, so before we end off, let's end off with a quote. Okay, this is a quote by L. Ron Hubbard, an LRH quote. If you, the individual, knew the truth and you were processed towards the truth, you would be free. Only lies degrade you. This is a lesson of Scientology. And that's from Scientology 8008, the book, I think. Yeah. This truth is just epic. It's just all about the truth and trying to... I feel it's like, I guess, you start with a little lie and then you have to make up a few little more lies to cover up that lie. And then it's like you get in this trap of just having to say lies, and then you end up coming up with this huge... There's just lies everywhere, and there's this huge... And everything's just a lie then. It's like it snowballs, the effect of lying, and I feel like it's very much possible that that's the truth of life, almost. That it's just... We don't know what the truth is because we've gotten caught in some sort of habit of saying lies. And so when someone comes along telling the truth, it's like, whoa, and no one believes it. Like what George Orwell says, where he says that in times of great deceit, telling the truth becomes a revolutionary act. And it's just like, you're just telling the truth. It shouldn't be a revolutionary act, but it is. But when everything is just full of lies, you know, it's just like, what the hell is going on? It's wild. It's fun. I'll just read it out again. If you, the individual, knew the truth and you were processed towards the truth, you would be free. Only lies degrade you. This is the lesson of Scientology. Yeah, you got to keep on fighting towards the truth. And I think a lot of people are scared of the truth, especially I think, or just a lot of people. It just freaks people out. Like when you're finding out the truth, because it's just like, whoa, how much have we been lied to? I was just talking to a friend recently about a doctor who was treating someone's eczema, just like a skin condition or something, and of course they sort of just prescribed like drugs that had sort of side effects and stuff, and it doesn't cure the problem, you know. And then the person, for whatever reason, just cut dairy out of their diet, and that solved their eczema problem. And it's like, why didn't the doctor, whose job it is to know these sorts of things, recommend cutting dairy? And it's just like, because the whole medical industry just benefits them to just, you know, prescribe drugs for people's problems. And I was telling a friend about this, because, I mean, I know, and Scientologists know a bit more about the dodginess of doctors and psychologists and stuff like that, but the problem is epidemic. It's in all industries. That here's the thing: you've got maths teachers that don't even know how to teach maths, you know, and just pretending. And you got and this is part of the dwindling spiral. You've got schools that they don't want to publish results showing their kids to be dumb. So what do? They fiddle the figures, they change them and make it easy to get an A, so it looks like the school's better than what it really is. Do you know what I mean? It's epic. And my friend was telling me how he's a maths guy, and how, you know, if you hire someone to do some math stuff for you, you're not an expert on maths. So the maths guy comes and says, this is 6 months worth of work and all this sort of stuff, where the truth is it's really just 6 days worth of work. But the maths guy, like, but you don't know that. You know what I mean? It's kind of like with a car. You know, you take it to a mechanic, and the mechanic can open up and say, oh, the whole car's screwed up and you need all this sort of stuff done. And it could just be a lie. I mean, what do you know? So when it comes to the maths thing, my friend was telling me how that literally happens in their industry as well. Like, someone comes to someone with a problem and they end up just telling them, oh yeah, it's really messed up and it's a lot of work and all this sort of stuff, and it's just a lie. Like, it's like the same thing as you go to a doctor with a problem, with a skin condition problem, and they recommend something that's not good, and it's just something that helps them, and you know, it's something that they make money off, you know. So it's just in all these industries, and it's just like, how many office jobs are there out there going on right now, where it's just somebody who's just overquoted some job because they can get away with it, and they've said, oh, it needs to take this long to get done, and it just doesn't need to take that long at all. You know, it's just yeah, it's just like so there's so many things where the truth isn't going on, because this instance of people being hired to do mathematical formulas for businesses and stuff, and they're making it take way longer than what it needs to. That's an instance of not truth, of like lies. And then the doctors giving their advice that's just bad advice by selling the drugs is another instance of lies. And then another instance of the schools like not really like fiddling the figures so it looks like their students are getting more higher marks so that people don't realise how shit the school is at teaching. And another instance of the government like changing the way they calculate the unemployment rate so that the unemployment rate doesn't look as bad, so the government looks good. It's just lies, 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 lies. Like, and then there's fake news. You know what I mean? Which Trump talks about a lot. It's good that's come out, because it wakes you up to how there's fake news, and there's fake this, and there's fake that, and it's just fakeness everywhere. So you have this whole crazy world of just where everything isn't what it actually appears. Everything isn't what it appears to be. Superficially, things are fine. But if you actually look into things, it's just like you find that there's all these lies going on, and then you're stuck in that, and it's like, you got to keep on trying to find the truth and keep on working your way around to the truth, and then you'll be fine. You only get sucked in and bullshitted by lies. And you think about the church members of the Church of Scientology, and they've been sucked into this bullshit lie that what they're getting is standard tech, and it's not standard tech. And people don't want to confront the fact that they've spent thousands of dollars and many years and heaps of hours volunteering for the church, and they've been conned, and their friends have been conned. They can't confront how dumb they've been. I know this might sound rude, especially if someone who's listening to this is new to independent Scientology and is offended by. I mean, but it's just the truth. I mean, you have to face the fact that you've been dumb and you've been conned by Miscavige and RTC and stuff, and they've actually been messing up the tech. You know, and people don't want to confront that. People don't want to confront the truth because it's too much to confront. It's just too much of a head mess, you know. And that's when you say to someone, hey, like, the governments might be in communication with aliens and stuff. It's just like, whoa, I can't handle the fact that something so big could be so well hidden from the world and we could be lied to that much. It's just like, whoa. But that seems to be the thing with planet Earth. It's just like the truth is so not common and not in fashion. It's just all about lies. Anyway, that's it for today's podcast. Oh, speaking of that, I'm looking forward to part 2 with Jonathan Burke. So there's going to be a part 2 with Jonathan Burke, and I've got some more things to ask him. And yeah, that's good. I think he really needs a part 2 because that was just epic, that interview. So that's it for the podcast. It's time for you to climb back out of this rabbit hole, out of this interesting Scientology world. If you have any good Scientology-related Facebook posts or jokes, then send it in to andynolch@hotmail.com. Thanks for listening. I've been your host, Andy Nolch, the Space Cowboy. You have been listening to the Indie Scientology podcast. And until next time, take care of yourself and get up that bridge.